The time has finally come. Welcome back, everyone, to Utility Sports presented by Prize Picks. And we're here, the final big board of the 2026 draft cycle. Had so much fun putting this together, and I'm really excited to record on it. Of course, if you guys enjoy all of the content that you've had all year long available to you here at Utility Sports, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And let's get some comments flowing in the comment section. A little congratulations to everybody for making it through the 2026 draft cycle. Comment your favorite prospects, comment your big board, and of course, share your thoughts on my big board. And remember, my board style is very different from everybody else's. I would love for you guys to adopt this style. I would love for you to recommend this style to others because I think it's a lot more detailed and nuanced. And just a quick precursor too, this is not a mock draft. I tend to get comments about that every single big board video I ever do saying, this guy's not going to go top 10. Saying, this guy's not going to go top 10. This guy's not going to go 15th. Yeah, I don't really care where the player gets drafted. This is my own evaluation, which is different than a mock draft. And I hope, again, you guys do enjoy. Remember, there are levels. I've actually made a couple of alterations to the levels, removing a couple of the final levels. So now we just have greatest of all time great, Hall of Famer, All NBA, All Star, quality starter, which is a top 3-ish caliber player on a championship team, starter, which is a top 5 or 6 player on a good team, role player, which is a top 8 player on a playoff team, and then depth piece, which is 9th through 12th on a roster, and then end of bench, which is 13th to 15th. And then if you're below that, if your floor goes below that, then that is essentially two-way contract or out of the league, because there's really not too much of a huge difference between those two things. And let's just take a quick look over here at our examples. So when you see the bars in today's video, remember the bottom of the bar is the projected floor, and then the top of the bar, like you see over here, is the projected ceiling. I think it's very intuitive, but there's also other information that is important. These lines right here represent certain levels, right? So this one right here is starter level. This one above it is high quality starter. This one above it would be all-star. This one would be all NBA, so on and so forth. And I have them labeled throughout the video today. So if you have questions about the board, feel free to ask below. I'll be answering all of those. I read every single comment on the channel. And then, of course, I have my numerical rankings, 1 through 60, which is what I'm going to share with you today in my final big board. And then, of course, player name, where they went to school. So not only do you get my potential range, which I really love to do, but you also get my actual numerical ranking on my board. And then you also get kind of the visual representation of the proximity of prospects. Notice in this example here, player Y, player Z, and player X are all very close to each other, which for me then represents that the top 3 players in the draft class are all very comparable or very good as well, and they're all kind of in that same tier. And then notice there's a physical gap between players 3 and 4 in my big board example here, so that would give you an indication that maybe I think player 4 is a tier below that top 3 grouping, which we'll obviously see some examples of that in today's big board video. Of course, with withdrawals and stuff, the big board has shifted drastically since last time. It's been a couple of months since I've shared a big board with you guys. Of course, that's given me time to go back through the film numerous times again and again, dive back through all the analytics. We'll talk about all of that today as well. So again, I really hope you guys do enjoy. Let's not waste any more time, and let's jump over to the bottom of that big board, and we'll work our way up as per usual. All right, and starting here at the bottom now, you'll see that the bottom of the board is flatter than usual, and I feel like this is kind of an atypical year because of all of the withdrawals. You think about certain guys like Braylon Mullins, you think about Milan Momcilovic, you think about Flory Badunga, a whole bunch of names that were featured in previous big board iterations that officially did not stay in the 2026 draft. And then, therefore, as a result, I've kind of dampened the end of the draft for me, which has flattened out the backside of it. So we're maybe not going to spend as long as we typically do on players in that 50 through 60 range. although there are some notable names, and there's already probably some people that have contention with some of the names already in this 47 through 60 grouping. But like I said, we'll start 60 and work our way back up. Tyler Bilodeau at number 60, very good stretch shooter. Shot it very well for a while in his collegiate career. Had a really nice season, very efficient season this past year at UCLA with some really good true shooting numbers. And again, the shooting ability itself is what really gets him on this board. Now, I think there are some other limitations, and with the way that the modern NBA works, the shoot-only archetype is, I think, dying. And Bilodeau has some pretty good efficiency all over the floor, but I think defensively there's going to be limitations, kind of a tweener big with not real legit rim protection, and a guy who I think is just going to struggle to defend out in space. So very interesting skill set, obviously very heavily offensively slanted in my opinion, but somebody who had a really great college career, started at Oregon State and then continuing on at UCLA. Definitely was able to fill it up. We'll see if he catches on, but very skilled player for sure. Tamin Lipsey at number 59 for Iowa State. This is a very good point guard, someone who carried a very high assist rate, especially this final year in college basketball. And I feel like not only did Iowa State run through him to certain extents, but they were also able to set up a lot of their offense because of him. And I think with Lipsey specifically, there are some questions that I think are worth pointing out. But you're really looking at him as kind of like a pass-first point guard, as a guy who's going to be able to initiate offense. He carried a, like I said, very high assist rate, 28.9% this past year, which is the 97th percentile, and only an 11% turnover rate. So very good stuff. Assist to turnover rate numbers were up across all of college basketball this past season, but Lipsey had very good numbers as a passer. Now, unfortunately, his efficiency as a scorer wasn't quite as good, just a 54.6% true shooting mark, and just 31.6% from behind the three-point line, but very active defensively too, over a 4% steal rate. So a lot of the analytics do really like him. Again, Iowa State had quite a good season for themselves. They finished 29-8 this year, and Milan Momcilovic was, of course, I think their best player, but Lipsey gave them some really nice stuff, as did Joshua Jefferson, who we'll also talk about in this big board a little bit later. Oscar Cluff at 58 is a player I'm excited to talk about. Older prospect, not really one who I think has a bright NBA future ahead of him, but he was a good college player. Played for South Dakota State for a little bit, and for Purdue was kind of a bread and butter fit next to Braden Smith and next to Trey Kaufman-Renn in Matt Painter's system. And I do think there's like a real legit argument that Cluff is one of the best screeners in this entire draft class. He's big, burly, strong, and physical, and that served him very, very well in the college game. Now, is the offense a little too limited and the defense probably not mobile enough to actually hang in the NBA? More likely than not. So do I ever see him becoming a depth piece in the league? Probably not. But he was very serviceable for Purdue as a big man. Gave them some really nice stuff, especially on the offensive glass as a screener roll. Big man, has pretty good hands. And like he's like a really super poor man's Steven Adams. And I don't say that as like a huge slight, because Steven Adams is an awesome player, and Oscar Cluff was a very good player in college basketball for the role that he was serving. But again, I think with the modern NBA, the emphasis on skill, the emphasis on pacing and space, you need to have players who are multifaceted offensively to really be able to ever survive postseason basketball or just NBA regular season basketball in general. And Oscar Cluff, I think there's just a few too many limitations for him to achieve at that rate. At 57, Jacoby Gillespie is a super interesting prospect to talk about. Began his college career at Belmont, played for Maryland a year ago alongside Julian Reese and Derek Queen in what was a very good Maryland Terrapin roster. And then after his head coach, Kevin Willard, departed for Villanova, Gillespie entered the portal as well and then found his way over to Tennessee to play for the Volunteers with Rick Barnes. And unfortunately for him, he didn't build up the efficiency off of his junior campaign with Maryland, which was very good, a 60% true shooting mark. And unfortunately, in his senior season, just carried a 54.3% true shooting percentage, despite being such a high-volume three-point shooter. But again, like we talked about with Lipsey, the real value is the passing, over a 30% assist rate this past year for Gillespie, and I think that's one of the biggest intrigue points. I just do think right now in the NBA it's very, very hard to kind of break into the point guard position in general. There's so many good talents. The league has altered and shifted from traditional pick and roll point guard play, although it's still valuable and we see certain guys stick around and find and carve out roles in that kind of area of the floor, in that kind of area of a niche or team context. But for Gillespie here, it's going to be an uphill battle for him, just given some of his physical measurements and the inefficient season he just had as a scorer. But I think with the replenishing of the draft toward the back end of it, it opens up the opportunity for him to hear his name called on day 2 of the NBA draft. And that's one of the, first of all, it's a great achievement. But then secondly, it opens the door for him to sign with a second round exception or sign a 2-way contract, catch on through summer league, and it gives him opportunity to actually get on the floor. And I think anytime you can get opportunity to play, it opens up the door for more possibilities, more opportunities. And the gap between these guys, listen, even on this board, you're going to see pretty substantial gaps. You're going to see players who have huge disparities between the bottom of the board and the top of the board. But in reality, in real life, the gaps really aren't that huge. Like, all of these guys can compete with each other. They can all play at a high level on the floor. It's just about the consistency, the reliability of those things. And Gillespie, year over year, hasn't had that kind of shooting efficiency, consistency that you'd maybe want to see. Graham Ike at 56 for Gonzaga. I feel like Gonzaga always does a great job developing their front court play, and specifically his physicality, his ability to rebound the basketball and get on the glass and achieve in a lot of those areas was very, very good for Gonzaga this past year. For Ike in general, you're looking at a player that was very efficient from the floor, over a 60% true shooting percentage, of course, predominantly inside big, but this past year he dabbled with that three-point shot quite a bit. About 1 in every 6 shots he took was a three-point attempt. And I think there is a little bit of room for him to grow and step out behind the three-point line just a little bit. Shot over 33% from 3 this past season, which was very, very good. 74% at the rim, which was quite dominant as well. And he did take 71 total three-pointers. So if you're optimistic about his development and growth going forward, I thought this year was a pretty nice building point for him. You go back to his start of his career at Wyoming specifically, and he shot 1 3-pointer his freshman season for the Wyoming program. And even last year, the year prior to this year, he shot only 33 3-pointers. So he's been really stretching and developing and growing his game. He's a little bit of an older prospect, but obviously there's been constant continued development, growth, and effort put into his game. So it'll be interesting to track how his career goes. Again, the bottom of the board, a little bit flatter than normal, but some interesting players in here. Ryan Conwell is definitely one of them. Very, very good season for Louisville. Constantly was the guy that stepped up, especially when Maliq Brown Jr. was out. Now, for Conwell specifically, I think there are some limiting factors for him kind of going into his NBA career. Not only, again, you're looking at a guy that you're trying to get into the barrier of entry of the hardest position in all of basketball to play, which is the point guard spot or lead guard spot. It's just very difficult to break into, but super high volume three-point shooter. Of course, that's what you expect for Louisville Cardinals guards to begin with. They just shoot a lot of threes. That program does under Pat Kelsey. But very efficient season for the most part, 57% true shooting. His free throw rate is just all right. It's not great or anything. And I think, defensively there is a little bit left on the table for what you would probably want from a guard. And again, if it wasn't the most competitive position in the entire sport, like, he's had really good college seasons, whether it was at Xavier or this most recent year at Louisville. He's had some awesome seasons. It was huge for them this year. Again, I can't emphasize enough how good he really was on a per minute basis, super productive. 24 points per every 40 minutes, which is very, very good. But again, the translation to the NBA is going to be, I think, still a uphill battle for him. Kylan Boswell, someone who it feels like he should be 25 years old. I feel like he's been in college basketball forever, but he's actually still relatively young, in his early 20s yet, despite being, I think a long-term mainstay in college hoops for quite a while. And he's had a really nice career. Obviously started down in the Southwest United States in college, and then for Illinois this past year, I thought just kind of had the best season he's had yet. And played a really pivotal role alongside Keaton Wagler, alongside the Ivisic twins, alongside Mirkovic, alongside Andrej Stojakovic, and really gave them not only some really nice point of attack defense, but some reliable ball handling, some quality shooting at times too. And I think for Boswell specifically, like, he's got that NBA kind of player frame with the strength, the physicality, the ability to defend up the lineup a little bit. It'll be interesting to see where he goes on draft night, if he does get drafted or not, but I think Boswell's definitely an interesting player. Tucker DeVries at 53, again, another guy who's bounced around college basketball, whether it was West Virginia or before that Drake, and then obviously at Indiana to end his college career. And I think a very interesting player, a guy who can put the ball on the deck and score it from all over the floor. And I do want to talk about a couple of his numbers here real quick for you guys too, because they are quite interesting. The true shooting percentage was not great this past year, only 55%, but over 2/3 of his total shot attempts were three-pointers. And while he does get assisted a fair deal, he has a ton of volume, over 212, over 210 above the break threes this past year. As a forward-sized player with some guard skills, he did a nice job of creating for others a bit, around an 18% assist rate and just about a 10% turnover rate. So pretty turnover averse. Again, like I said earlier, assist to turnover rate was just up across the board this year in college hoops. But DeVries is obviously a skilled player. He's done some really nice stuff in his college career playing for his dad. Has obviously been given and granted that opportunity, and a high usage, high volume player for the most part throughout his college career, but he's been very productive in that usage as well. So he's had a really nice career for himself. And I think for Tucker DeVries, there's a very good chance that he hears his name actually called on draft night, and if not, he'll catch on pretty quickly as a two-way player. I would have to assume at the very least, just given his combination of length, size, and skills. Darrion Williams did not have a tremendous year at NC State. I won't shy away from that fact. Did not play super well his final year of college basketball, but I want to go back to who he was at Texas Tech prior to transferring into NC State. And this is a forward with legitimate passing skills, very unique, creative passer, throws a lot of high leverage passes. While yes, it does open him up and make him a little susceptible to turnovers at times. And in his lone season with NC State, while he did really struggle to shoot it from two-point land, had career worst efficiency in the mid-range area, struggled a little bit more at the rim than he did the year prior for Texas Tech. Part of that has to do with scheme and coaching and kind of overall court context around him. He still is, I think, a very talented player, and in the right system, in the right scheme, in the right context, can definitely be additive toward winning. Isaiah Nelson at 51 is a player that I think a lot of people are really starting to like toward the end of this draft cycle, and for good reason. The analytic numbers are very, very strong for him, very productive, whether it's on the glass or in the steal and block department. I still think there are some limitations here for him in terms of stepping out behind the three-point line, scoring the ball from all around the floor. Everyone's looking for event creation on defense and forcing blocks or forcing turnovers and getting block shots and allowing your team to get out and run that way. And that's definitely very valuable and additive. But I do think also doing that in the American Conference is a little bit less impressive than it is in other conferences. So, I think for all of these guys, especially the small school situations, some of the analytic numbers might be a little bit misleading, just given the quality of play and the power conferences and the difference between, a mid-major and a high-major program and what that looks like in terms of your game-to-game competition, your conference competition. It's just massively different. And listen, UCF's got a pretty solid program. Isaiah Nelson was obviously a huge part of that this past year, but he comes in at number 51 on my board. Speaking about power conferences, Jaden Bradley was the player of the year in one of them. For Arizona, he was terrific in the Big 12. So you might be wondering, how is he all the way down here at number 50? Again, part of it is the barrier of entry for the point guard position in general, which is what Jaden Bradley probably needs to be to find success in the NBA. And for Arizona, he was the lead guard, brought the ball up the court a ton next to Braden Burries. And I thought at the combine, especially in the scrimmages, kind of showed some meaningful development for his intentionality on the ball instead of just being a drive to score type of player. And this is something we've seen his growth in throughout his college career, kind of transitioning from a score first guard to a table setting guard. And that was, I thought, really positive for him to showcase at the combine. and it helped his stock, in my opinion, a bit. I have him at number 50 here because, again, like, there's limitations. He's not a great perimeter shooter. Arizona's offense itself doesn't really open up a lot of great looks from the perimeter to begin with, but Jaden Bradley is definitely a head-down, drive-first kind of player, and I think with the way that the modern game works and trying to beat drop coverage, you need pull-up jump shot making to really thrive at the highest level. And while Bradley gives you a lot of really nice things and can definitely provide value for an NBA franchise to an extent, I think the limitations are going to be quite apparent early in his career. Number 49, I have Dillon Mitchell from St. John's, and I feel like I've been talking about Dillon Mitchell forever here on the channel. I do like his game quite a bit. I've comped him previously to a guy like Jared Vanderbilt, who back earlier in his career in Minnesota was such an interesting point of attack defender, someone who is super functional out of the dunker spot as a lob threat down there. But even with all of that in mind, that still kind of play style poses limitations. When you don't have the floor spacing, you're kind of reliant on tight window passing, and against really good rim protection who can play that cat and mouse game very well, it becomes tough to adequately feed the dunker spot successfully, especially for a forward type player. And I think those are a lot of my concerns for Dillon Mitchell, which is why his floor comes in a little bit lower than a guy like Jaden Bradley and lower than a guy like Izaiyah Nelson, just because his offensive functionality is going to really, I think, revolve around the dunker spot, cutting opportunities, and transition play. Now, he did have some really great moments this past year, especially for St. John's, but going back earlier in his career was really remarkable, whether that was for Texas for a couple of years of his college career or for Cincinnati. I mean, he's been a big-time player throughout college basketball in the last 3-4 years, has made a lot of winning plays, and is also a guy that I thought at St. John's really stepped it up defensively with his activity level, his effort on the glass. He has all the physical traits, and he's very, very impressive physically. Of course, the ball skills is really what opens up player ceilings and opens up their ability to be functionally effective, but I think the athleticism is a really nice starting point for him to continue working off of. I think he'll be really impressive at Summer League. For whichever team does draft Dillon Mitchell, I think there's going to be a good player in there that you can kind of crack out of the shell a little bit, employ him all over the floor defensively. Again, you have to be a little creative to maximize him on the offensive end of the floor, and for that reason he comes in at 49 on my big board, but I do like his game, and I'm still very intrigued by what his NBA career looks like. Number 48, Ugonna Onyenso from Virginia. And you see a pretty big step up toward that top 8 role player kind of ceiling for a player here. Now, while I don't think Ugonna Onyenso will ever legitimately crack into the top 8 of a rotation for long stretches of time, barring injuries, what I do think is there's at least some semblance of legit night-to-night value that you can get from Ugonna Onyenso. Not only is it important having a third big man on your roster for foul trouble and injury situations, but it's also really nice when one of them can come in and be an absolute stymie at the rim as a shot blocker. Carried a crazy block rate, over 17% block rate this past year for Virginia. Now, again, I think there's a little bit of a gimmick to that. You think about college basketball, there's no defensive 3 seconds. And Virginia exploited that. They stuck Ugonna Onyenso at the front of the rim, and they dared teams to try him at the hoop. And Onyenso routinely won that. And it was very effective for Virginia, and I'm not faulting their coach or for that kind of scheme at all. But I do think, like, just traditionally those numbers, while they're very impressive, and it is a testament to Onyenso's shot blocking, which is really, really good and one of the best in the entire draft class, the numbers are, I think, a little bit deceptive in terms of what his actual value is going to look like in the NBA when he has to 2-9, get in and out of the paint a little bit, defend out in space. And, oh, by the way, the pull-up shot making in the NBA is a little bit better than it is in the ACC. So I do think, like, while Onyenso was super valuable in the college game and definitely can find ways to impact winning in the NBA a little bit, I think there are some just general limitations, plus the fact that Virginia wasn't even really elite defensively with him on the floor. They were adequate, solid, but I still think, again, the gimmick wasn't a complete, perfect result anyway, and we saw that for stretches this year anyway for the Cavaliers. Number 47, Jack Kayil from Alba Berlin. Very interested in Jack Kayil's game. I think this is a player who has some league guard potential. Again, you're going to hear me say the barrier of entry for that position is extremely high, and it hurts these guards in the draft because I talk about them, and there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent that really never gets that opportunity. You think about guys historically who have been 15 to 20 plus point per game scorers in college that barely ever get that opportunity. Isaiah Thomas, you think back to him, he was the last pick of his draft class as one of the most lethal scoring guards we've had in college basketball in the last 15, 20 years. And Jack Kayil's an interesting player because he's not quite that dynamic scorer, but he's got some really interesting creation abilities as a passer, obviously pretty solid positional size, and has really good pro experience playing for Alba Berlin while staying pretty productive there, boasting a positive assist to turnover rate in a professional league against grown men. Very good stuff. Now, the gap has kind of shifted a little bit between college and the international pro game, just given the fact that there's more international players in college basketball now. There's more former professionals in college basketball now. Whether that's right or not, that's a different discussion. But the gap has kind of closed a little bit between the NCAA and other international leagues, but definitely it's still very impressive to succeed in the way that Jack Kayil has in Alba Berlin as a professional basketball player overseas. And I think that's going to help him early in his career translating to the NBA. Number 46, I have Duke Miles from Purdue. Very excited to talk about him as a player. If he was 3 inches taller, this would be a potential first-round pick. He is very, very good. He has a tremendous shot fake, very talented, shoots the ball adequately well, and really gets after it and competes defensively. He was such an integral part for Vanderbilt. Sorry for the little typo there saying Purdue. For Vanderbilt this past season, he was so good for them. And I think just in general, he's had a really great college career. And, he's a guy that I think a lot of people are going to undervalue and underrate. I'm sure he's not going to make the top 60 on a majority of people's big boards. I think he should be. He was very, very good for Vandy. Vandy's going to have multiple players on my final big board here today for a good reason. And, I know Tyler Tanner got a lot of the credit and love, but that whole program was very, very good. They've done a great job recruiting. They've done a great job in the transfer portal. They bring in a lot of talent, and then they also develop that talent. And the state of college basketball right now, your development has to be fast. You have to be very focused on day one of summer work to get your team and your new players caught up to speed. Vanderbilt's been doing a great job of that, and Duke Miles was such a terrific player for them this past year. And for what was a much smaller backcourt, their ability to compete on defense, defend without fouling, and then also the offensive game was just very, very strong for Vandy this entire year. Going into number 45, I have Maliq Brown out of Duke. And Maliq Brown, another player who was a transfer portal addition, this time for the Blue Devils. And if this was the NFL draft and it was drafting for one side of the ball only, like how in the NFL you can draft a defensive player or an offensive player, Maliq Brown would be a legit first-round talent, maybe even a lottery talent on the defensive end of the floor. He is definitely one of the best 14 defensive players in this draft. The issue is he's a complete anti-gravity machine on offense. He carries no gravity or offensive value, really. And unlike even Dillon Mitchell, who we talked at 49, Duke would stick Maliq Brown in the dunker spot, but he's not as functionally athletic as Dillon Mitchell, not quite as much of a threat there, and he doesn't put as much gravity on the rim, as much pressure on the rim, and I think all of that stuff kind of complicated Duke's offensive attack for the most part this year, and it really manifested itself when Patrick Gungba went down for stretches of time. And without Gungba, Duke's offense struggled just because all of the pressure all of a sudden really fell on Cam Boozer's shoulders to create pretty much every good look for their offense. And oh, by the way, he's going to get doubled. And teams felt very comfortable sagging off of Maliq Brown, rotating back to his body. And I really don't even think in the dunker spot he's oftentimes ready to catch and actually finish the play. And I feel like there's a lot of growth that still needs to happen for him offensively. But he is outstanding on the defensive end of the floor. And that is what gets him into the top 45 on my final big board here. Because he's got very good length and size and measurements. He's got, obviously, intelligence and very high basketball IQ that I think is super additive. He finds ways to get his hands on the basketball. He rebounds the ball adequately well. And I think just in general here, again, he's got so many offensive woes and flaws that it is going to be hard for him to constantly and routinely stay on the floor. I think 12, 15 years ago, this would have been a player that more people would have valued into the first round, maybe even midway into the first round, like around pick 18 to 20. Like people would have started talking about this guy as a potential first round pick in that kind of range if this was, say, the 2011 draft and not the 2026 draft. But as time has changed and the game has evolved, the emphasis on spacing and offensive talent, like we talked about with Dillon Mitchell, that all rings true here from Maliq Brown too. But again, very special defensive prospect, very smart, high intelligence, active, really good hands, and always finds a way to impact the ball when he is out there. So for all the offensive limitations, there's a lot of really great stuff going on the defensive end of the floor as well. Number 44, Otega Oweh from Kentucky. Very good driver of the basketball. I think very smart, heady player who makes a lot of winning plays. I think back to the NCAA tournament where Otega Oweh made a bunch of huge plays for them in that game against Santa Clara. And just in general, like Otega Oweh for his entire college career has been really productive. He's a great driver of the ball, and also like the shot, while it hasn't been super consistent or routine, like I think the mechanics are in an okay spot where some team's going to buy into who he is. And this entire time, like the last 3-4 years, I just have felt like Otega Oweh feels like an Oklahoma City Thunder player to me. And depending on what team actually picks him up in the second round, I do expect him to get drafted. It'll be very interesting to see how his development unfolds and what kind of role they put him into early on, whether it's just sticking him in the G League and giving him more time to develop down there in a low-stakes environment, or if it's quickly getting on the floor. And we've seen guys like Will Richard do that last year for Golden State. We've obviously seen OKC throw some of their guys into the fire over time from two-way contracts getting into the NBA. AJ Mitchell's a very good example of that the last couple of years for OKC before they gave him a standard contract. And I think Otega Oweh is someone who can definitely drive winning in a positive manner. And at 44, I feel like that's a very solid pickup for them or for whichever team ultimately picks him up on draft night this year in 2026. Richie Saunders at 43. If he wasn't about 47 years old, he would be way higher on my board. And unfortunately, you know how the BYU Mormon missionaries get down, so they're a little bit older as draft prospects, a majority of them, and that is true for Richie Saunders, who will be, I think, about 25 years old by draft night or close to it. He is quite old for his draft class, and that is, of course, unfortunate, and he's coming off a torn ACL. So there's just a couple of things off the court that are really hurting him, both the injury and the draft age. And that, for me, were some limiting factors as to why he's all the way down at 43. But I have to admit, the film is very good. And I think back a lot to that game between BYU and Kansas, where he was unbelievable for them in a game that AJ DeBanter really struggled and kind of faded away in the limelight against Darren Peterson in a huge battle in the Big 12. Richie Saunders was the guy that answered the bell, stepped up big time, and almost powered a huge second-half comeback. Remember in that game, Darren Peterson had over 20 first-half points. It looked like Kansas was going to run away with it. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, Richie Saunders comes out of nowhere, and he's hitting NBA-range threes, several feet behind the college three-point line, off the move, whether it's standstill, off the catch. He's very, very skilled as a shooter, and that obviously is going to be his primary skill translating to the NBA. But he has a really good compete factor defensively, too. There's another player that I think is just going to find ways to produce toward winning. Does he ever get a huge opportunity? Does he ever crack into the top 8 of a rotation? As you can tell from my board placement here, I don't expect that to happen. But he is a winning player who can provide value for a team probably early in his career on a two-way contract as he kind of rehabs back to health. But a team is definitely going to find some value here for him in the second round. Number 42, I have Quadir Copeland from NC State, the second Wolfpack member on the board. Remember, Copeland was with head coach Will Wade back at McNeese State as well. And Copeland's such an interesting player because not only does he have very solid positional size, but he also boasted a career-high efficiency season this past year, over 60% true shooting, very successful at the rim, and actually shot 39% from three this past year as well, which was a huge development for him. Now, the in-between game is still a little bit of a work in progress, not the most efficient in that mid-range area, and struggled a bit in the floater range, but really got after it this year, had a great season for NC State in general, and then defensively very active, over a 3.5% steal rate, which is very good. And then, of course, the biggest thing about him is his playmaking. Over a 41% assist rate, which was one of the best in the entire country. You think about Jeremy Fears Jr. for Michigan State at over 50% assist rate, which is unbelievably gaudy. Very, very good. Now, Copeland is a little bit more turnover prone, nearly a 20% turnover rate as well. So there's still a lot of kinks to kind of iron out and work out in his game. But he's definitely built up his stock here the last couple of months through the Portsmouth Invitational, into the G League Elite Camp, and then into a Combine invite. So very good couple of weeks and months here for Quadir Copeland leading up to the 2026 NBA Draft. And he comes in at number 42 on my big board with, again, his floor a little bit below end of bench, but his ceiling actually near top 8 role player. Again, this is kind of that 100th percentile upper outcome, and this is that 0th percentile bottom outcome. At 41, I have Fletcher Loyer, and you can tell a much smaller range of outcomes here. I just think Fletcher Loyer, such a good shooter that he's going to be able to stick around in the NBA. He probably never ends up being a 20-minute per game player in his career, if I had to guess, just given some of the physical limitations. But there's a good player in there, and he has a lot of value just off the ball, and we've seen that for Purdue for years now, whether it was next to Zach Edey or Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn. Like, being able to spot up and really shoot the ball is such a great asset for a team. And Loyer himself was just so good at that his entire college career for Purdue, where if we take a look at his shooting numbers just for his entire college career, like very impressive stuff. Over 600 career above the break 3-point attempts, over 40% on those throughout his entirety, and throughout the entirety of his career, over 42% from the corners, over 44% in that mid-range area. Well, listen, the rim volume and finishing numbers are not great by any stretch of the imagination. They were a little bit better this past year, made 2/3 of his shots at the rim this past year. But for the most part, throughout his career, he has struggled at the rim. He struggles in the painted area. But really, it's an outside-in game for him. It's all about generating closeouts, holding gravity and spacing off of other players. And listen, the ceiling, again, not very high. This is kind of the product of a draft class that's lost some talent toward the top, where some guys who would maybe have been in the 50s or high 40s end up in the lower 40s at number 41 here, for example, with Fletcher Loyer. But Purdue had so many good players, a lot of winning impact. So you're going to see a couple of Boilermakers yet to come as well after seeing Oscar Cluff and Fletcher Loyer already. Number 40, I have Bruce Thornton, staying in the Big Ten here with Ohio State Buckeyes star Bruce Thornton. And if he was a few inches bigger as well, he would be significantly higher. Now, I think there's a little bit of complication with his size and his play style. Thornton was incredibly dynamic as a creator for Ohio State, and specifically this year when he came off the floor, their offense completely crumbled, going from about 122 offensive rating with him on, all the way down to about 106 offensive rating with him off, which is one of the more dramatic shifts in all of college basketball this past season. And I think for Thornton specifically, it starts with his shot making off the bounce and his ability to score it from the perimeter, whether it's behind the three-point line or on some pull-up jump shots. And what that does is it opens up the rest of his game. Defenders have to get up into his body, respect his space. And then as a result of that, he's able to drive the ball. Had an okay assist rate this year, nothing really crazy, but he is very turnover averse. Now, he's also someone who's coming off looking to shoot it a lot. So if you're not passing the ball as frequently, you're probably not going to turn it over a ton either. But for me, Bruce Thornton, I think, is a very good value player, likely going in the second round. Again, if he was a few inches bigger, he'd probably be dramatically more valued in the draft class. So Thornton's a really solid player. I do like his game a bit for Ohio State. And I think, again, his shot making really showcased some of it in the NCAA tournament too, where he hit some big shots. They came up short, I know, against TCU in the NCAA tourney, but very skilled player. A guy that I think could definitely catch on in the NBA with the right destination and landing spot. At number 39 now, I have Tyler Nickel from Vanderbilt. And Tyler Nickel specifically for me, a little bit more of a streaky shooter, but a guy who has a little bit more of that compete level on defense. I think physically can get after it a little bit better than a guy like Fletcher Loyer. Now, again, the shot consistency and the reliability as a shooter is a little bit less than Fletcher Loyer. Felt like he hit a lot of huge shots for them anytime, especially down the stretch of games when help would come off of him. I feel like he would just burn teams so routinely, so consistently. So He comes in at number 39 on my board. Again, you might wonder, okay, well, if his ceiling's a little bit lower based on reliability and overall career consistency as a shooter, why do you have him above Fletcher Loyer in your actual numerical rankings? And again, I just think right now, like, the defensive effort is a little bit better, and he's also just coming off a really, really strong season. I think, like, you're splitting hairs between some of these guys, but Tyler Nickel, I think, is a very solid prospect and someone who I think at the end of the 30s is definitely worth coming off the board in that kind of range on draft night. Number 38, I have Baba Miller from Cincinnati. I always think back to my way too early mocks many years ago, talking about him going into his Florida State career. And while it didn't completely pan out for him immediately at Florida State, I think his time at Cincinnati was a huge development for him, where he did a lot of work on his body, got bigger, got a little bit stronger, got a little bit faster. And he really started to produce in the box score numbers to career best, whether it was his offensive and defensive rebounding rate, where he actually has turned into one of the more dominant rebounders in college basketball. Very, very good on the glass. And of course, you're looking at a long, rangy, defensively minded forward. And that's something that is a real rarity in the NBA right now, with guys who are long, agile, quick, and mobile like Baba Miller is, which is what had me so excited about him going into his Florida State career when he was skinny like a twig for Leonard Hamilton. I kind of thought this guy could be a real special Swiss Army knife weapon for Leonard Hamilton's defense, which is always very good, but it just didn't play out that way. But Baba's gotten better and he's worked on his game. The biggest question mark is really that three-point shot, because his junior season shot it actually quite well, but then this past year and for the overwhelming majority of his college career in general, he has not shot the three ball very well. So I think, again, if you're looking at him hoping that he can break into being a top 8 rotation player for a team, we're going to need to see uptick in his overall three-point efficiency. At 37, I have Trey Kaufman-Renn for Purdue. This is one of my favorite short rollers in the entire draft, and he's got unbelievable touch. He is a super efficient offensive player, very good offensive player. Really understands how to screen roll, does a nice job presenting into open space when he does so. And he just always, I feel like, finds the open area of the floor down the middle of the court or out a side pick and roll. He's got soft hands. He's ready to catch the ball, receive it, and then play off of it, whether it's that long 17-foot push shot that we've talked about here on the channel a couple of times, or the ability to play off the catch in the short roll as a playmaker, facilitator. Very, very well-rounded offensive game. Now, defensively, the space coverage is a little bit of a question mark. Not a legitimate true rim protector, so you can't probably lean on him being a five-man super consistently for you, which is what kind of complicates some of his translation to the NBA. You're probably going to need a stretch big if you're going to play him effectively as a four-man. And if you don't have a stretch big, then, listen, you can operate in some high-lows. There's some functionality there, but it might just limit the end results or the higher-end outcomes of what your offense might look like. So, again, for a guy like Trey Kaufman-Renn, who was so great in college, the reality is for some of these players, like, you go into the NBA and all of a sudden, you're not getting 12, 15 play calls for you a game. And you have to find other ways to be productive. And listen, I think Kaufman-Renn can definitely be that by operating out of the pocket, being open in space, and finding the soft spots in defense. I definitely think he can do that. But there are also just, again, those limitations for him that will come and rear their ugly head a little bit, which is why I have him down at 37. But I do think that's higher than most other people are going to have him, because, again, the offense is very, very good. Number 36, I have Zuby Ejiofor from St. John's. Very good driver, very good agility skills, mobility, and then also defensively, really great defensive player. Did a lot of the heavy lifting for St. John's this past year on both ends of the floor. Really carried their offense for the majority of the season. Now, a lot of that was kind of tough volume and maybe not the best offensive plan of attack and maybe not the most aesthetically appealing play offensively, but he is very, very good. And I think there's a legit chance he hears his name called in the first round this year on draft night, which I would be very excited about, very intrigued by. But for Zuby in general, like, a lot of his excitement and injury going into his NBA career is going to revolve around the defensive end of the floor, with his ability to block shots, get in the passing lanes, disrupt out on the perimeter, apply ball pressure, and then rotate down, get again, rejections at the rim, and then also just rebound the ball, outlet, and go from there. He's a very multifaceted player. Skilled out on the perimeter, can handle it a bit, can pass it a bit. Moving up to number 35 now, I have Emanuel Sharp for Houston. And this is a player that I have really grown to like this year in the draft cycle a lot. Houston does a really nice job developing their talent. Kelvin Sampson's one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. And when you're talking about a Houston Cougar player, you're going to know that they're well coached. You're going to know that they know how to defend. You're going to know that they understand spacing and how to play off the ball and play off the catch. And Emanuel Sharp does all of that extremely well. Very good shooter, and then really good nose for the basketball defensively. Again, a little bit smaller. If he was a tad bit bigger, I feel like there'd be a lot more love for him. I think I'm going to be a little bit higher on him than most, which is what I was with Jamal Shead as well. I had a first-round grade on Jamal Shead in his draft class a few years ago, and the Raptors have found a very good value selecting him in the 50s. And I think for Sharp specifically, he's going to have a lot of success translating to the NBA because of his style of play. Over 60% of his shots this past year were three-pointers. He shot over 37% from three, which was not a one-off for him. He's been a relatively good shooter throughout his entire college career. Going back to his junior year, shot over 40% from three. Going back to his sophomore season, shot over 37% on above the break three. So he has a pretty good track record of success throughout his college career for the most part. And then really built on that this year with nearly a 25% usage rate. Not really the highest assist rate player, just 11%, but he doesn't turn the ball over at all. Sub 7% turnover rate, which is very good. And then gets after it and competes defensively at a very high level with a 2.6% steal rate, which is quite good. And then with him on the floor this year, Houston's defense was 10 points per 100 possessions better with him on than they were with him off. So this is a guy that I think just has a nose for winning, has a way about him that I think is going to translate really well into the NBA. I feel like this is the type of player that coaches are going to love in the league. And I think his ability and effort and competition level is going to help him a ton translating early into his NBA career. Number 34, I have Trevin Brazile from Arkansas. And if you would have told me 2 years ago that Trevin Brazile was in the top 35 on a draft board of mine, I would have said, oh, you're a little crazy. But that's the kind of year he had, and it's kind of the context of college basketball right now. Again, a lot of guys withdrawing has changed the shape of my big board pretty drastically. But Trevin Brazile, I think, deserves this. He's a very functional athlete, tremendous transition player, one of the best transition big men we've seen in the last 5-10 years. Does a really nice job running rim to rim, presents with size, and always looking for the basketball. That's something I love about him as a lob threat. He just runs the floor hard with the intention of scoring it when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. That's something that is super valuable. If you have bigs who run rim to rim constantly throughout the course of the game, you might not hit them every time. It's not going to be a layup or dunk every time. But the times that you do hit them, it all is set up by effort and energy. And Trevin Brazile, not only does he bring that as a rim runner, but he's also showcased the skill this past year to really step out behind the three-point line, found some real consistency playing off of Darius Acuff Jr., and had some unbelievable success as a shooter. And then defensively, I thought was really his best season in college basketball, which, of course, is a little bit of an older prospect. You'd expect him to continue growing and getting better and developing. But very active defensively this past year. And I think as a four-man, kind of a hybrid tweener big, there's a lot of value you can find by putting him next to other size, allowing him to run the floor hard, function as a screen and pop or screen and roll big man at times. Then also, if he's not necessarily asked to anchor a defense, he can be productive defensively as a weak side shot blocker. And again, that doesn't open up the possibility for him to have a super high ceiling. You see, I just have him here in the top 8 role player kind of range. But that's still a solid player that could maybe help out a team in spot minutes off the bench as kind of a third or fourth big man option for a franchise. At 33 here, I have Sergio De La Rey for Valencia. Very good positional size, tremendous passing IQ and intelligence, which is very standard for a lot of European basketball players because their developmental systems are just better than American developmental systems. And there's a huge contrast between AAU and professional European basketball for teens and young adults. And I think that has translated very well for some of the very best European talent that comes over to the NBA because they have years and years and years of better professional experience, and they're not just waking up on Saturday mornings and pressing the heck out of teams that are less talented than them. They're building up skills. They're developing in certain ways. And Sergio De La Reyes is, I think, a great example of that, where not only does he have some very good passing instincts and feel, but he also shot the ball really, really well this past year. Over 40% from three on the season for him, which was, I thought, a really positive indicator. Again, one of the things about these European prospects is they don't have the large sample size. They don't have all the minutes. They don't get the reins to an offense that you typically see a lot of these younger college players getting with their own programs. It's just a very different culture, and because of that, it's a little bit harder sometimes to evaluate some of these guys, because you're, instead of working with 1,000 minutes of film, you're working with maybe 400 or 300 minutes, 200 minutes in some cases, and it does kind of dwindle down how much you can actually see for these guys. But De La Reyes obviously has multiple years that he's been on my radar for. So he's a guy that I feel pretty comfortable with. Again, the positional size is one of the biggest pluses for him. Remember back what Juan Nunez coming out of his draft as an elite passer in the pick and roll with good positional size. De La Reyes is a different prospect than that. I think a better shooter than Juan Nunez was coming in, but still a very skilled perimeter-oriented player with the ability to operate with the ball in his hands and get others involved. Braden Smith at 32, talking about getting others involved. There's been no one better in the history of college basketball at that exact thing than Braden Smith, who is now the all-time assist leader in college basketball. Now you're going to notice my floor for him is dramatically lower than even some of his constituents in this kind of range, where I have his floor lower than Trevin Brazile, lower than Emanuel Sharp, lower than Zuby Ejiofor, lower than Trey Kaufman-Renn even, lower than Baba Miller, lower than Tyler Nickel, lower than Bruce Thornton, lower than Fletcher Loyer. And while Braden Smith is a very, very skilled player and, in my opinion, one of the best pick-and-roll passing guards in this entire draft class, he is small, and he is going to be a little athletically outmatched in the NBA, and that alone is going to present some issues. And I think as much as people historically have talked about athleticism as a ceiling raiser, I really think it's a floor raiser for players. If you're not a great athlete, you have to be so supremely skilled to overcome that, and it does kind of lower and dampen your floor a little bit. But luckily for Braden Smith, I still think there's some outcomes or some real possibility, maybe like a 15% chance that he turns into a top 8 rotation player for a team. I look at a guy like TJ McConnell, who competes at such a high level, super smart, is all about winning. That's the kind of guy that Braden Smith can be in the NBA. He's very good as a mid-range pull-up shooter, just like TJ McConnell as well. Braden Smith shot over 45% on mid-range pull-ups this past year, which is very, very good. So I think Smith, this is a guy that, again, the size, the physical limitations, all of that stuff's going to paint a picture about what everyone assumes his NBA career will look like. But for a guy this cerebral, who comes off pick and roll and can read defenses as quickly as he does, I think there's a chance that he catches on. And if he does, that's the pathway or optionality for him to really provide value. And I think, again, he's one of the best passers to short rollers, if not the best one in this entire draft class. So there's a lot of value. I think a bunch of teams around the league should be valuing a skill set like this because he shoots it adequately well. He competes at a high level. And again, he's just so darn smart with the ball in his hands that it's going to be hard to find guys who are better than him at the things that he's very good at. I think back to Ryan Nembhard last year, who went undrafted and then immediately was providing value to Dallas basically on day one of his NBA career because, again, he's a high IQ cerebral point guard. I think Braden Smith gives a lot of that here as well, which is why he's at 32 on my board. Joshua Jefferson for Iowa State at number 31. I like his game a lot as well. Very good connector feel, very good passer, and then really some good positional size. I think for Joshua Jefferson, some of the bigger question marks for him going forward is going to be the reliability of his scoring and also how turnover averse can he be. He throws a lot of cross-court passes and a lot of high leverage, high danger passes. And luckily for him, a lot of those turn into assists because he's very, again, decisive, and he makes some passes that really wow you on film. And that's kind of the big intrigue here for him because he's a forward with really unique passing instincts and skill. And if you can kind of reel that in and kind of make him a little bit more turnover averse this past season, I did carry a 15% turnover rate, which was not very great, but it comes with a 27% assist rate, which is very good. So you can kind of live with that to a certain extent. And then also defensively, like very competitive, over a 3% steal rate, over a 3% block rate. There's a lot of reasons why a lot of people around the league like Joshua Jefferson's game a lot. He's a very solid player, and I have him at 31 here on my board. Terrace Reed Jr. at number 30. Very interesting intersection of size, skill, physicality, rebounding, and then passing feel. And you can't play for Dan Hurley as a big man without a base level of playmaking instinct, especially as a starter. And Terrace Reed Jr. did a really nice job of that this past year for UConn, setting up a lot of their action, helping out in DHOs and top of the key rub action. Like a lot of really just nice stuff that Terrace Reed was able to provide value in. And then we got to the NCAA tournament, and he killed everybody on the glass. The UConn Huskies made a run to the NCAA championship game. Unfortunately, they did come up just short, but Terrace Reed Jr. was awesome and brilliant throughout that entire run, whether it was scoring the ball as a low post option with a lot of the nice offensive sets that Dan Hurley runs, or getting it his own off the glass. So you think back to even the very first NCAA tournament game this year for UConn where Terrace Reed had like a 30-30 game. It was just unbelievable. That was one of the biggest games for him, headlining the NCAA tournament that put him onto first-round radar for a lot of people. And with all of the withdrawals, he does end up making it into the top 30 on my final big board, just barely. But, you know, the withdrawals obviously had a big factor in that end result. Moving into number 29 and 28 here now, I have a couple of young guns who I think people can very understandably realize why I have them where I do on my board here. Koa Pete from Arizona and Abuka Corey from Stanford coming at 28 and 29 respectively on my final big board. And for Abuka Corey, this is a player that's going to be much higher on a lot of other people's boards, is because they really value the idea of self-creation, and pretty much every single shortcoming that Abuka Corey ran into this year has now been chalked up to, oh, well, team context this, team context that. And because of team context, everything that went wrong, whether it's misses at the rim or high volume without a lot of assists, it's all been chalked up to, well, he didn't have great teammates. And listen, yeah, he'll get into the NBA and he'll have better teammates. He'll also be facing better competition and better shot blockers, better rim protectors, better point of attack defenders. Like, the game doesn't just magically get easier because you have more talent around you, because now you're facing more talent routinely as well. So I would keep that in mind, first of all. Secondly, like, they actually finished at the rim better with him off the floor than they did with him on this year at Stanford. That's something I have not seen anyone else besides myself talk about. So that's that. But I do think there is starter upside, and that's where evaluating the skills and actual talent is important, because it's not just what the numbers tell me. It's not just what, the win-loss record says. It is very impressive what he's able to do with the ball in his hands. He's got unbelievable coordination, very good change of direction skills, and then he's just very creative. It feels like he's got the basketball on kind of a string like a yo-yo, and there's moments where he makes plays or gets downhill and drives it in a way that you're like, there's no way he was supposed to be able to get to that spot or do what he just did, but yet he finds a way pretty consistently. So the film is pretty impressive. The highlights are unbelievable, and I think that is fueling a lot of the general love for him as a prospect. Koa Pete at 28, I think super interesting. The jump shot is a major question mark right now. It's basically better to assume that there is no jump shot than to assume he'll ever have a solid one. He shot under 30% on mid-range shots this past year. Shot 35% from three, but it was 7 of 20 from the field. So are you going to really bank on a volume or sample size of 20 shots? Probably not, and clearly his representation isn't either, with the intentionality of altering his jump shot before his pro days and workouts. And as a result of that, it now is a major cause of concern for teams, I would assume. And I have Pete at 28 here because there is still some really good stuff that he does. He's big, strong, physical. He looks like an NBA forward. And while aesthetic bias is something I, for the most part, try to avoid very, very aggressively, I do think there is value to being a big, physical, strong forward. There's not a lot of guys with the build that Koa Pete has. I think about Carter Bryant, another former Arizona Wildcat. I think about OG Anunoby, who's got those big, broad shoulders, strong arms, strong body frame. Like, it's valuable. It adds to your defensive context. It, I think, can be really useful for a team. And obviously, Kobe was a part of a lot of winning at Arizona as well, and he was additive in that despite some of his own shortcomings. Tommy Lloyd's a great coach, found a lot of great ways to utilize him and find success with him on the floor, but it is still going to be a major question mark. And if he lands on a team that doesn't have a great stretch big man, all of a sudden there's going to be some real concerns I have for that team's end results offensively and the overall spacing context. But the playmaking is pretty solid. He's a great roll man. I think back a lot to his college debut where he dropped a 30 bomb. And a lot of it was rolling down the middle third of the floor and finishing above the rim super routinely. So there is a good player in here. The jump shot is going to be that major swing skill for him. If he even becomes a semi-respectable jump shooter, watch out, because he could be a huge steal. But that is not what I'm projecting here on my final big board with my range. At 27 now, I have Malik Thomas. 26, I have Nate Ament. And at 25, I have Kareem Lopez. And I think these three are all very fascinating. They come with their own host of benefits and talents and strengths, and they all come with a litany of concerns or question marks. For Malik Thomas, the biggest question mark for me is his floater range, and that's something he went to a lot at Arkansas but did not make a lot of in his college career, and that's going to be something that I think when it comes to teams running him off the three-point line in the NBA, which is really the new fad, right? Run guys off the three-point line, continue to keep your team defense in rotation, but just don't give up the open catch and shoot threes. And for Malik Thomas, like, that's what he lived off of next to Darius Acuff, whether it was in transition or against gap help. He was awesome from the three-point line, which is why there's still value here, and which is why I could see outcomes where he's a top 6, top 7 guy in a rotation. Very valuable player, possibly. But the negative outcomes are pretty drastically poor as well. And that's where, if you run him off the three-point line, is the playmaking and is the inside-the-arc scoring good enough to be reliable in a tight playoff series with better team rotations, good team defense? That's going to be a challenge. My prize picks lineup today centers around the fever dream game that we've got coming up. And, of course, anytime Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are about to face off, it will be cinema. I have Angel Reese at more than 27.5 points and rebounds. She's been thriving in her new environment after being traded from Chicago to Atlanta this past WNBA offseason. Caitlin Clark at more than 19.5 points. I thought was a pretty solid mark for her. I think she'll get going. Both teams coming in with 9 wins, so it's a big race here to get to double digits first between these two franchises. And then Ryan Howard at less than 3.5 assists. She's been, over the last 4 games, averaging less than 3.5 assists, so I think she's going to be under that mark again here against the Fever. So definitely an exciting game here. Remember, guys, if you use code HMA over at Prize Picks and play $5, you can get $50 instantly in lineups. Once again, play $5, get $50 instantly in lineups using code HMA over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is now available in more than 40 states, so be sure to check it out and play responsibly, only if you have the means to do so. Continuing on with Nate Ament at number 26 on my big board, and this is a prospect that takes a lot of projection and a lot of vision for what his development could look like, his role at the next level, and how that could benefit him from a productivity standpoint, because just quite frankly, he did not have an efficient, effective season at Tennessee. Now, he was a volume player, did put the ball in the hole quite a bit, was a go-to option for Rick Barnes, and Tennessee had a good season as a team, but I think there was, of course, a lot to kind of be concerned about from the film. He finished at the rim very poorly, especially given his length and size, which are two of his biggest proponents going into the draft class, just given the fact that he has obviously NBA forward length, NBA forward size, some theoretical shot making talent, but it just didn't really present itself too much in the college game, where he shot 43% on 2-pointers, sub 40% on threes, of course, as well. And I think there's just kind of this whole host of issues, and a lot of it stemmed through the areas of the floor and the channeling that Tennessee did to get him the ball, whether it was playing with his back to the basket in the mid-post, trying to face him up a little bit like he's Carmelo Anthony or Kevin Durant, which before the college basketball season, Rick Barnes compared him to his former college athlete Kevin Durant, and I just think that idea or that philosophy that was who Nate Ament is, it was clearly incorrect. I think Nate Ament is much more of the Jabari Smith Jr. discipline, where he's going to be an off-the-catch player, someone who thrives more as a spot-up role. And that's where your projection comes into his NBA career, which is why I haven't quit him entirely, despite the fact that I don't think his most recent college season really promotes or promises anything to be a first-round caliber player besides the defense. And I think the defense is one of the biggest things that I have faith in, given the fact that he is long, mobile, and was productive on the defensive end of the floor while being a high-volume offensive player. Gives me a lot of optimism about him finding success in a role in the NBA. And I do think he has a bit higher upside than some of these other constituents around him in this same area or portion of my big board. For that very reason, I think he can obviously protect the rim a little bit as a weak side shot blocker. I think he's going to have active hands, and I think that's all going to be really necessary for him to provide value, especially given where his likely draft slot is as a more than likely top 18, top 16, maybe even lottery pick in this year's draft. There's even been some noise about Brooklyn at 6 just selecting him, and I actually do think the Nets with Jordi Fernandez's system and offense would actually do a really nice job helping him find success early in his career. But again, I just have real questions about the actual upside here. You're noticing I'm not putting his upside into super high quality starter or all-star or anything like that, because I think just very cut and dry, like at his pinnacle, at his best, he's probably being utilized as a 3-and-D player. And again, at this point, that's very theoretical, because given the system he was in and the role he was playing at Tennessee, we haven't really even seen the consistency or the reliability of the 3-and-D element either. So that's what I'm banking on here. He is still very young. There's a lot of time for him to grow and blossom and mature his game. I think if he gets a little bit stronger, adds a little bit of athleticism through the weight room, he's a player that's going to, I think, continue growing a bit, and then also just reach that potential possibly of being a starting caliber player in the NBA or one of those valued big long wings off the bench. Kareem Lopez at 25 from the New Zealand Breakers. I think this is a player that's going to get drafted much higher than 25. I am certain that some NBA teams really like this guy, and there's always a market in the league for players who have positional size, defensive acumen, ability to play off the catch, and then playmaking from his position grouping as a forward or wing with the ability to put the ball on the deck, attack closeouts, and then really be connective out of that, where he gets maybe a paint touch or just outside of the paint and he's able to spray it out to the weak side corner or strong side on nice little dots over to same side passing. Like, there is a lot of stuff that Kareem Lopez does quite well. His measurements were some of the most interesting and appealing in the entire 2026 draft class, going back to the combine for a second. Like, he was very, very interesting measurement-wise at the combine. Came in with the biggest hand size, which for a lot of people might not sound like a big deal, but I do think that actually does matter. Like, you look at basketball being a game of inches at times, and having that extra length and that extra like range with your hand is, I think, very valuable, not only defensively, but also rebounding the ball, getting tips and deflections. It just kind of stacks up in a big way, and it's part of every single possession you're on the floor, potentially. And I think that's a big reason why Kareem Lopez could definitely stick around in the NBA as a player who could really provide value off the bench. I don't see him ever being a starting caliber player, but he comes in with a bunch of really good experience. This is another player who was projected a top 10 pick before the 2026 draft class. And for me, I just think there are some limitations. We've seen it from other players who have streaky jump shots, and if they never really iron out some of those mechanical issues and just become a better shooter over time, which is very rare. People make it sound like you can just grow and blossom as a shooter the moment you step in the league, which just isn't true. I think there's a lot of hope yet for Kareem Lopez, but that shot is going to be priority number one, I believe, for a development team once he's drafted. Let's move on into number 24. I have Allen Graves with not starter upside, but I think he's going to be a quality player off the bench for a team. Now, I do think his athleticism gives him a little bit of a lower floor, which is why you see him with a floor below Kareem Lopez, below Nate Ament, below Malik Thomas, even though I think his skills right now are probably a little bit advanced for them as a redshirt freshman. Had a really great season for Santa Clara, albeit coming off the bench. Only started in 4 games this past year and played around 23-24 minutes a night, which gives you a good indication not only of how that Santa Clara program was, very good team this year, but also why there's some questions around Allen Graves despite all of the production, because the analytics really do love him. Nearly a 5% steal rate, 5% block rate, very high assist rate for his position, lower turnover rate, and oh, by the way, he shot the three ball extremely well at an above 40% from three clip. Now, I do think defensively there were some challenges. Santa Clara predominantly used him as a hedge and recover defender, which is a lot more prevalent in college basketball than it is in the NBA. That's going to be a question for him, given the fact that I think he has interesting agility and mobility skills. Like, he's active out on the perimeter defensively, which I like. But I also think there's questions about, okay, he gets into the NBA. If he's a 4, not a 5, how valuable is the delay action stuff, which I think is still valuable, but teams might not play through him quite in the same way that Santa Clara used him when he was on the floor. And then I also just think, in general, you're looking at a guy that defensively, if you're not going to allow him to hedge, like, there's some switchiness to his game for sure, and I think around other sides, if you are playing him as a 4, I think you'll be able to compete just fine defensively, but with another big behind him. But there are questions about his ability to actually contain the basketball instead of just blitzing or hedging onto the ball at times. So I think all of those questions are pretty valid. For me, I still am very optimistic about him, have him number 24 on my board, and that is, I think, a vote of confidence from me. I like his game. I think he sticks around in the NBA for a while. When you have smart, intelligent players who have some dribble, pass, shoot skills, they are usually a success story. And I think Allen Graves very much can be that in the 2026 NBA draft this year. 23, Chris Sinak out of Houston. I do have him with a little bit of starter upside. He's a very good athlete with a 7'5" wingspan. And he put that wingspan to pretty good use this year. Not great use because he didn't block a ton of shots, maybe as many as you would want to see from him. But he did a great job rebounding the ball, and I think his athleticism really applies itself on the glass, both offensively and defensively. And if you go back to some of the pre-Houston tape, you go back to high school, you go back to McDonald's All-American game, like, you get to see a little bit more skill than what was really on full display for Kelvin Sampson's offense for Houston, where Sinak was thriving with the ball in his hands a little bit more, creating off the bounce, has kind of a unique handle for a player his size, and there are some really interesting characteristics and traits for him to maybe grow into and blossom into, which at his higher end outcomes makes him a unique 5-man in the NBA. But I think one of my biggest questions for him going into his NBA career, and part of why I only have him at number 23 right now, is his shot diet. I think there's some real DeAndre Ayton in his game in terms of the fact that he loves shooting 15-footers and maybe doesn't play into that physicality, into that traffic quite as much as he should, given his length and physical advantages that he possesses over other prospects. And I think with all of that in mind, it really shows itself through his shot chart, where he shot a high volume of mid-range jump shots, didn't get to the rim a ton, but when he did, he was super efficient. I just want to see more rim volume, and maybe in the NBA system with better spacing around him and maybe a little bit more firm offensive coaching about his role. Maybe at that point, then you could see him have a real uptick in his rim volume. There's a good chance that he actually outperforms my range for him here. One thing I always do going into these big boards, I don't want to just have a super wide range, especially for all of these young prospects. Like, it would be super easy for me to hit record and say, oh, Chris Sinak could possibly be an all-star. It would be super easy to do that because there are pathways for all of these guys developmentally, especially the young ones who have so much physical talent, to really blossom and grow. But I'm trying to restrict the ranges as much as I can so that it's, first of all, very direct and clear to you guys how I'm viewing the prospect myself and what the most likely chain of outcomes are. If you want, you can envision an imaginary bar that supersedes all of the stuff that I have on here, because there's pathways where these guys, again, if they get into the right developmental system, the right opportunity, the right amount of touches, the right surrounding cast around them, these guys are all so good that they could definitely achieve at a super high level. But again, I'm trying to find the range of most likely outcomes. And for me with Chris Sinak, I found him in this kind of range, and I have him at number 23 on my big board because, again, I do like him, but I think there are some questions that I need answered before I could say that I'm completely enamored with him as a prospect, which is why he finds himself outside of the top 20 on my final big board. 22, I have Alex Karaban from UConn, and this is a player who I think just does have a lower ceiling in general than some of his other constituents in the same range, but I think he's a winning player. You don't have players who are this smart, this impactful toward winning for 4 straight consecutive years at UConn that don't find success in the NBA. And every single year I have some guy that I am significantly higher on than the consensus. A few years ago it was Jamal Shed. And A.J. Mitchell was another example of this. Baylor Shireman's a guy that was an example of this too. Like, there's always players that I find that I think are just undervalued around college basketball and around the NBA draft itself, because they're looking at physical traits and tools and some of the upside and highlights. And Alex Karaban, if you're just a highlight watcher, is not going to come across as this unbelievable player. Very good catch and shoot player, has some moments on the ball for UConn over the last couple of years where he stretched his game a little bit, but he's just an A-plus connector. And as the NBA really emphasizes playing through stars, drive and kick, connectivity, moving the ball around the perimeter, maximizing your advantage, extending that advantage, players like Alex Karaban are unbelievably good at that exact thing, and it's what wins in the NBA. You saw the Knicks in the NBA Finals. Obviously, they have a really great lineup with OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson, and company, but I just think for Karaban in general, like, you look at the style of play, being able to move the ball, swing the ball, when someone's created a closeout, being able to play off of that, whether it's knocking down the perimeter shot, where Karaban's a really great shooter for his entire career, or swinging the ball one more to beat an X out. There's just a lot of stuff that Karaban does very, very well. He's a tremendous post passer, which you have to be to play for Dan Hurley. And while, again, it's a lot of little small nuanced details that make him so effective, I feel like the moment he gets onto an NBA franchise, his coach is going to love him. They're going to trust him to be on the floor around other talent. He blocks shots adequately well for a forward, and he's got okay mobility skills to stay in front of guys, especially the fours in the NBA, which is what I expect Karaban to predominantly play as. So this is a guy that can help contenders. If a younger team drafts him, he's a really nice addition around other talent, and I just think in general he's going to far overcome and out-exceed what other people and draft evaluators are saying about him in this cycle. Moving on to number 21, I have Izaiyah Evans, who has, I think, some starter upside here. Kind of want to compare him and his career potentially to a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr., who was a second-round pick, actually. I think Izaiyah Evans will be a first-round pick in this draft. I think the NBA has wised up a little bit about some of these guys. But for Evans in general, the reason I have him at number 21 is because of the three-point shot first and what that does for the rest of his game. He's an unbelievable three-pointer shooter, someone you always have to have a body on or want to have a body on, and if you don't, he's probably going to burn you from deep. He was so great for Duke playing around Cam Boozer this year, but also going back a year ago in a much smaller role, less minutes, less opportunity, playing around Cooper Flagg, Kon Knipple, and Kaman Maluach. He was such a high-volume three-point shooter, and I think Tim Hardaway Jr. has been exactly that throughout his career. He's played around a lot of other great talent. Kay Cunningham, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and he always has kind of that way about him where he's got supreme confidence. He steps on the floor, he laces them up, and he is ready to shoot the rock. And I think Izaiyah Evans is going to bring that exact identity to a team where he's never going to fade away from the moment or be scared to make his own play and really insert himself into the game. And that's exactly the kind of confidence, in my opinion, you want from three-point shooters in general. They're on the floor for a reason, to space and spread defenses and then burn them if they leave them. And that's exactly what I think Izaiyah Evans is going to do really well in his career. And then his sophomore season was a huge development year for him, going from a freshman year where he was pretty much only a three-point shooter to his sophomore year being a much more balanced scorer. Obviously, still the three-point game was central to his initial plan of attack, but he did a much better job attacking closeouts, showcased some Euro step finishes around the rim, some above the rim finishing, which was, I thought, a really good sight for him too. Played really well in transition. This is the type of player that gets in the NBA and I think just fits really well. We'll go back to the Knicks for a second, talk about them again. Look at what Landry Shamet was able to do for New York in the NBA playoffs and especially the NBA Finals. He was such a core piece for them off the bench for what was a little bit of a thinner team. He stepped up big time for them all playoffs long, and I feel like Izaiyah Evans can have very similar impact for a team where he becomes a reliable shot maker, a great floor stretcher with a really quick trigger from behind the three-point line. And oh, by the way, his defense has improved tenfold from his freshman season too, where you could kind of tell his freshman year the game looked pretty fast to him on the defensive end of the floor, and I think it slowed down a bit going into his sophomore season, felt a little bit more comfortable, and I think going into his NBA career there's a really good chance that he ends up carving out a very nice role for himself, which is why he has a high floor and I think a respectable ceiling as well with some starter upside. At number 20, I have Christian Anderson here from Texas Tech, and this was one of the more difficult players to kind of nail down, only having him in starter upside. feels a little scary for me. I'm not even going to lie to you, because I think the shot-making talent and the passing talent is so extreme that he could very well out-exceed this. But at the same time, I do just have reservations about the size in general. Now, listen, we did just see Jalen Brunson win an NBA Finals as the best player on a championship team. But just because Jalen Brunson did it doesn't mean every other 6-foot guard in the history of the sport is going to do it. And I think with Brunson specifically, some of the things that he does really well is playing turnover reverse by being so strong in the mid-range, being so strong playing off of 2 feet, being certain of every single pass before he throws it. And Anderson's just a different player than that. A super high-volume pull-up shooter, some of the best volume, honestly, in the entire draft class, and some of the best track record of success on those types of shots, too. So he's an elite shooter for a draft prospect, and then also very high-leverage pick-and-roll passer off the top of the key and off the middle of the floor. And while that's all very good, it does lend itself to a little bit of a higher turnover rate, and he's not quite as a get downhill, get stationary, find a nice open pass type of player. And I think there's going to be some really awesome moments for Christian Anderson. Again, the barrier of entry for point guards in general is just very high. But when you can shoot it the way that this guy does, very effective in catch and shoot opportunities as well. This is a player that I think would make a ton of sense for a team like the Detroit Pistons at number 21. I think San Antonio at 20 would be a really interesting landing spot, depending on what their plans are with De'Aaron Fox going forward. I think just Christian Anderson's a good player. Had a really great college career. Kind of surprised me a little bit that he bypassed NIL and actually stayed in the 2026 draft. But he received a green room invite. A lot of fans around the league of his, I think, honestly, like just given the fact that he did receive a green room invite, he's probably a player that has been a little undervalued by NBA draft media this year. And at 20, I feel pretty good about the actual landing spot for him. I think the top 20 or so players in this draft are very, very good. And Christian Anderson is an awesome example of that. Moving up a little bit into closer to high-quality starter upside, but still in that starter quality upside, I have Jaden Quaintance from Kentucky. Now, I do think his impact at times very likely could be near all-star level, but I have him at 19 here because not only is there injury questions and concerns, which I think are valid and at least warrant some concern given the fact that he tore his ACL and really just didn't play much this past year for Kentucky, only got on the floor 4 times total the entire season. Like, the medicals are going to be a big factor here for his actual draft slot, of course. But then I also think you're looking at a prospect that has a very, I think, cut and dry, flat offensive game. He's not going to be an elite short roller. He's not going to be an elite connector as a big man. He is going to be predominantly a play finisher, which for me does limit his ceiling. Now, defensively, again, the all-star impact might come because of how tremendous of a rim protector, shot blocker he is, the mobility skills that he has out on the perimeter, and that all blends itself into a very high floor for him as well, where no matter what, whatever team he's on, there's a role for him. There's a way that he's going to be able to achieve and give impact and play at a high level for, whether it's coming off the bench as a shot blocker. You look at what Robert Williams III did this past year for Portland. That's probably like one of the floor outcomes for Jaden Quaintance, which is very exciting for him. And then as a starter, like if he is going to be a good offensive player, it really stems around landing next to a point guard with legitimate talent as a passer, playmaker with scoring gravity. I think about someone like Luka Doncic, how easy he would make the game for Jaden Quaintance offensively. That kind of player is obviously rare to find as a teammate, but would be so additive for a guy like Quaintance in terms of his NBA career early on. I think as long as he lands in the right kind of system with enough shooting around him and a very good playmaker who can weaponize his athleticism as a lob threat and a play finisher, I think there's some really good stuff that can happen here. But Quaintance at 19 is, again, a vote of confidence from me, even though we didn't really see him much this past year. The stuff he was doing at Arizona State as a 17-year-old was absolutely ridiculous. And there's a really good chance he outperforms my numerical ranking because if he is healthy, he could end up being one of the 12, 13 best players from the draft when it's all said and done. Number 18, I have Hannes Steinbach here from Washington. And he is the first player on the board so far that we've talked about that has extended into possible high-quality starter upside. For a big man who is as good at rebounding as he is, he's one of the best rebounders in all of college basketball this past season. And in my opinion, arguably the best rebounder in the entire 2026 NBA draft, especially since Ruben Chinyelu decided to return to Florida. I think Steinbach at 18 is a very solid number for him. Again, another player that you get into this kind of range, there's a lot of real proximity between these guys, as you'll note on my board in terms of the visual presentation and layout. there's a good chance that, again, 3-4 years from now, we're looking at him and saying, hey, this might be the 12th, 13th best player in the draft class, because there are some legitimate ball skills too. Shot very well from above the break this past year, over 35% on above the break threes. Now, the volume's not super elite, but very good touch around the rim. Pretty good track record of success as a scorer in the college game. Was basically walking into 18-10 this past year for Washington. So if you're looking for a big man who can produce, be productive without having plays called for him, Hannah Steinbach's your guy. There's some dynamic pick and roll elements. There's obviously the pick and pop game, which is going to hopefully continue to grow and blossom for him moving forward as well. Like his game a lot. Again, this is a very strong top 20 in the draft this year. And in I think other years, you could probably have seen him get a lottery grade from me. Just this year, it's just so tough because there's a lot of guys I really like. So he comes in at number 18 on my board. Now at 17, I have Merez Johnson Jr. from Michigan. I think we'll start with the floor here for Merez, which there are some still small concerns of mine. He shot the ball decently well this past year from three for Michigan, but Dusty May did really a nice job of kind of inundating and acclimating the Michigan offense around their inside play, around Izaiyah, around Merez, and around Yaxel Lendeborg, and it allowed all three of them to thrive inside the arc more than just focusing on their outside of the arc play. Now, of course, Yaxel had such an increase in three-point volume that he's kind of an outlier in that trio, but I think in general, the biggest question for me going into Merez's NBA career is the consistent reliability of his offense if he's not just an inside finisher. And I think there's a little bit of intrigue for me between his outcomes offensively and his outcomes defensively, because I think defensively he's a real rarity. At 6'9", 7'3" wingspan, 250 pounds, he's one of the most mobile bigs we've ever seen, to the point where I really comfortably believe he's going to be able to guard on the perimeter in the NBA a lot. And I wouldn't even really classify him as a big. I'm looking at him more as a long physical forward, and that's a great thing because the defensive upside is really being able to stick him at the point of attack, allow him to roam, make plays all over the floor. At times, I feel like he's one of the more diverse defensive prospects we've seen in the last 5-10 years, which is really incredible. The question, though, is offensively, if you're not playing him as a five-man, what does your five-man skill set look like around him? How do you maximize him? Obviously, if it's a five with really good passing skills, it should work out just fine. Using the dunker spot as kind of a little valve or outlet for them to play through with Merez. And then obviously just a lot hinges on that three-point development going forward, because you step out another couple feet for that NBA three-point line. It's a little bit of a further shot. And with offenses reaching highest highs of ever over the last few years, you need to be efficient in those shots because of the kind of, again, bar that you're trying to reach. It's not just good college offense anymore. You're looking at trying to be great in the NBA scheme offensively, and shooting 33, 34% from three doesn't quite get you there. Now, it's an okay starting point, and obviously it's not the end-all be-all from percentages, but I think, a lot of people can understand probably where some of my spacing concerns lie a little bit with Merez. He's not the best playmaker. I think he's an adequate one, and he comes in at 17 because I think there are some offensive question marks at the very least going into his career. But again, if we were just judging solely based on the defense, there's a really good chance that he ends up being the flat-out best defender from this entire draft class when it's all said and done, which gives him, I think, immediate starter potential in his NBA career. At 16, I have Cameron Carr from Baylor. This is a player I like a lot. Now, maybe doesn't have the highest end outcomes in terms of being an all-star, but I think there's a lot that you can kind of take away from his game and apply very readily into the NBA, the ability to attack closeouts. Cameron Carr has some of the best functional athleticism in the entire draft. Not only does he carry a 7-foot wingspan, but he's also a wing who can legit standing vert dunk from below the basket. And that is very valuable for him when he cuts. That's very valuable for him in transition when he's able to take off outside of the painted area and still score it. He's a great above the rim finisher, and all of that manifested itself big time for Baylor this past year, where he was able to thrive, show off his scoring skill set, and shoot it very efficiently at the rim. Around 80% field goal percentage at the rim, which is just remarkable for a wing, something you don't typically see. He's an absolute transition demon, which I like a lot. And then his catch readiness. He shoots it very well from the perimeter with legitimate range. This is a guy that's very, very good. And at 16, I feel really confident about his early translation into the NBA. You see his floor being in that top 8 role player range. That's the bottom outcome for him, is being a contributor for a team, in my opinion. That's awesome. That's a really good floor. then a majority or a bulk of his bar here sits in that starter range, where I think he's just going to be a very complimentary player. There's a lot of teams around the league that I think could really use this kind of skill set. Someone who is long, athletic, explosive in the ways that he is. Had a 4% plus block rate, which is very impressive for a wing in college basketball, but then shot it so well, very good off the move. Just a really special prospect, and having him at 16 honestly feels a little bit low, but again, that's just kind of the nature of the beast with this draft class in general. Really like his game, and I think he's going to thrive in a big way at the next level. Moving into number 15, I have Dillon Swain, who has a bit of a higher upside outcome here, and a lot of that stems around his ability to create off the bounce. He's got one of the best crossovers in the entire draft class, a lot of self-creation in his college career, whether that was back at Xavier or this past season at Texas, and he was doing that in Sean Miller's offensive scheme, where maybe the spacing wasn't tip-top shape, and he didn't have a stretch big man, and yet he was such a force getting to the rim so consistently. Had over 170 rim attempts this past year in the college basketball season, which is very, very good. And he was super efficient on that while playing around guys like Matas Vokatitis and in a spacing context that didn't have a lot of elite three-point shooting around him. So I think the high-end outcomes are very good. I also think the low-end outcomes are very strong as well. Again, you're looking at a player who I think more than likely just slots in immediately, whether that be as a starting caliber player or a high-end off-the-bench player for a team. And I think a player that I've compared him to that I really like as a floor comparison kind of in this range is Kyle Anderson, who, listen, the jump shot coming in out of UCLA was spotty. He was also a little bit of an older prospect, but a really great college player. He was drafted super late in the first round and way overachieved his draft slot. And I think Dillon Swain, depending on where he gets drafted, might overachieve his draft slot pretty readily too. And I think you look at Kyle Anderson, a player who, obviously earned the nickname Slow-Mo. Swain has a lot more physical advantages than what Kyle Anderson has, but both of them have kind of a similar skill set when their ability to drive, kick, play off the bounce a little bit. Remember, Kyle Anderson was a point guard back at UCLA in college, and he did a really nice job kind of translating to the NBA as a point forward type who fit around other talent, was very connective, and has had a really great career because of that. And I think Swain's low-end outcomes kind of mirror that of Kyle Anderson's. And again, this is really reliant on him never really developing that three-point shot to a high degree, where he had a much better season shooting it this past year for Texas, although the volume, again, is not huge. And, if he misses 2 or 3 more shots than he makes, like all of a sudden the percentages don't look as good. So that's the issue with the sample size a little bit here. But for a guy who was such a heavy self-creator, so effective as a scorer, it's very hard to not have him in the top 15 on my final big board, which is why he comes in exactly where he does. Number 14, I have Henry Versar from UNC. I think this is the best delay action 5-man in the entire draft class, and I think at the very least he's going to be a very good off-the-bench big man with the ability to step out, shoot it from behind the arc. I think he's very, very good in drop coverage. A lot of people have kind of pointed to him not being a good defensive prospect. I think that's just lazy chalking it up to steal and block rates and looking at the defensive playmaking statistics instead of the actual film. The film is very, very good for Henry Versar. This is probably one of my players that is significantly higher on my board than where he'll be around the consensus of the NBA draft world. He's very good. He was elite for UNC this past season. Their team was honestly terrible with him off the floor, and when he stepped on the court, they were very good and always had a chance at winning with him on. And I think for UNC in general, not only was he such an instrumental get from Arizona, where he was also very good, but he was a brilliant fit next to Caleb Wilson, which I think gives me a lot of kind of promise and intrigue into what his career could look like around other talent. For UNC, they didn't have the best backcourt. They didn't have the best offensive system. It was really a 4- and 5-man wrecking crew between Wilson and Versar this past year. And I think going into his NBA career, if you get him around other talent, you get him around a talented point guard. You can flow into DHOs super routinely. You can pick and pop, pick and roll. He can be a short roller, very connective in that area of the floor as well. Like, this is just a very good player. He has ball skills. At UNC, they literally were setting ball screens inverted for him so that he could drive and either throw up lobs to Caleb Wilson or spray it out to shooters around him. You think about Luka Bogovac, for example, with that. Like, Versar was really, really good this year. I think a lot of people are way too low on him, and I'm very happy to have him in my lottery here on my final big board. 13, I have Adai Mara from Michigan. So ranking these bigs right next to each other, I think Vesar, there's a few things that Vesar does better than Izaiyah. I think he's a little bit more comfortable challenging out on the perimeter, playing a little bit higher in his drop coverage, which is a big reason why I'm confident in him as well defensively. But for Mara, you just can't erase the size. 7'3", 9'9" standing reach, 7'6" wingspan, an unbelievable block rate around 12%, and the film is very good to match it too. Now, there were challenges throughout the year, whether it was facing some teams with really good pull-up shooters in that pick-and-roll game. That's where he's going to be a little bit of a liability, which is why his floor is a little bit lower. And you would think, okay, well, almost certainly Izaiyah is going to be a starter, but I think there's going to be matchups come playoff time in his career or situations throughout his career where certain nights he just isn't a good matchup for who else is on the floor. You know, I think back, like, if he was in the league 10 years ago or 8 years ago with prime Steph Curry, prime Damian Lillard, I think there would be a lot of hunting going on because of their ability to pull up and shoot the basketball. Now, those are two of the best shooters in the history of the NBA, so I'm not trying to discredit Mara completely because of those guys. Those guys had their way with almost any big man throughout that generation. So, again, it's not really fair to Mara to say that. People are going to compare him to Wemby. People are going to say, oh, how does this guy help you beat the very best players? Like, again, I just think that's kind of lazy analysis, and it's not really the best way to deem how good a prospect is. I think the 82 game value here for Mara is extremely high. At the base level of winning in the NBA, you need to protect the rim, you need to shut off the paint. Mara does that very well, and I think those characteristics alone are going to make him very promising for a team defense with the ability to block shots, deter shots around the rim. And then offensively, there's a lot to like. Very good free throw shooter, so maybe there's some sense of belief that he can develop as a legit stretch big man. But I'm really not even worried about that. Like, if that comes, cool. That's a nice little addition that maybe helps him play into his higher end outcomes. Maybe this kind of range as if that jump shot really develops. But even without that, I still think you're looking at a player that is so valuable because he's so big. He can flatten out the floor very well, apply a lot of rim gravity and pressure. At 7'3" with good hands and a 9'9" standing reach, if he's sitting in the dunker spot, you can't just leave his body, and that's such a tool. You look at someone like Rudy Gobert, who's had a really good offensive career despite having almost zero ball skills. Like, that's a huge testament to the value of size, flattening out defenses, running to the rim hard, forcing tag defenders to tag onto you. And Izaiyah can do all of that. Now, he's probably not as mobile as Rudy Gobert was, especially earlier in Rudy's career, but I think just the size, the hands, and then the playmaking is really the biggest cheat code for him. Does carry a little bit of a higher turnover rate. I think there's some questions about his functional strength offensively. Can he actually punish mismatches by backing them down a ton because he is just that longer player build? We've seen guys like Porzingis struggle with that. We've seen Wemby struggle with that a little bit because it's just so hard when you're that tall to win the leverage game. It's just a near impossibility. So those are going to be some of the questions, but as long as his team can direct paint touches toward him off the catch, get him closer to the basket before throwing him the ball, I think there's some really good chance he finds success as a scorer. And then the playmaking, again, off the top of the key, you can just see over the top of everybody. He's got tremendous playmaking feel, as you would expect for a Spanish prospect. European channels of basketball just do such a great job developing the traditional dribble, pass, shoot skills for every single player on the floor, and Izaiyah is a great example of that here at 13. Number 12, I have Yaxel Lendeborg from Michigan. Much older prospect, going to be 24 years old before he ever plays a game in the NBA. And that does sound some of the alarms for me, which is why his ceiling doesn't really stretch that far into a high-quality starter. But the reality is he's an NBA caliber player before he ever steps into the NBA. Most rookies, they come in and they're going to be a net negative for your team for the most part. There are a couple examples where that's not true, but pretty much overwhelmingly, out of the 60 draft picks every single year, probably 58 or 59 of them are a negative toward winning. That's almost certainly true every single year, even the very top of the draft. That might be a little different this year, but I'll talk about that when we get there. But for Yaxel, I think he's one of the guys that won't be like that because, I've compared him to Josh Hart. I think he is a Josh Hart kind of plus player. Shoots it really well now in the NBA. I think he's going to get some of that Josh Hart treatment where teams dare him to shoot it and live with the results of him shooting at times. But he's got very good playmaking skills. He rebounds it very adequately for a wing player. Obviously has really great physical size and length and strength. He's just a super functional athlete. And he was so productive this past year at Michigan. He was productive the year prior at UAB. Everywhere this guy's been, he produces and produces at a high level. And from a year-to-year development curve projection. Like Lendeborg going from where he was at UAB as predominantly a play finisher, operating as a 5-man, to all of a sudden at Michigan playing around Mara and Morez Johnson Jr. and playing the 3. He was so impressive to me with the ability to kind of shift his game, be a little bit of a chameleon and alter who he is on the floor. And it won at the highest level in college basketball, NCAA tournament championship win. And Yax was just great that entire time, hit some huge clutch shots, was really willing to step out and shoot a bunch of threes, which was one of the biggest morphs of his game from where he was at UAB to what he was doing for Michigan. But again, just super easy to buy into him as a player. And I think there's really not a lot of outcomes where he's not a quality NBA player for the next 10 to 12 years, which is an awesome player to get. And if you can get him even outside the top 10 this year, it's going to be a very nice return on investment, in my opinion. Now we go up to number 11, and you see quite an uptick here in upside, even some possible all-NBA upside for Maliq Brown Jr. Now, I had a real hard time. I'm going to be completely transparent with you guys. Ranking these guards was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done for a draft big board. For the most part, I feel like my big boards have a pretty good track record of success. I don't say that to brag, but it's a testament to the time and energy and effort I put into these. And this guard class, I'm surprised I didn't lose all my hair, honestly. Like, there is so much to kind of dive through, sift through, dig into. They're all very different from each other. Like, Maliq Brown Jr. is an analytics darling for a guard because he has decent size, but he can really, really shoot the ball. He's got the best deep range in the class, in my opinion. He shoots a ton of threes. Basically, 3 out of every 5 shots he took this past year was a three-pointer. And, oh, by the way, he gets to the free throw line a lot, where almost a 45% free throw rate. So very good numbers from Maliq Brown Jr. And I think at the very high end outcomes, and this is one of the things we didn't really get to see at Louisville. He missed the NCAA tournament because of his back injury. That's a question mark a little bit looming up to his NBA draft situation and where he ultimately goes. The medicals are probably going to play a little bit of a factor in here. Of course, if a team takes him in the top 10, which is where I'm expecting him to go, very clearly they have the green light that he's going to be healthy and fine. But it's unfortunate because we didn't get to see him at the peak of his powers. And I thought early in his college career, he really struggled because of that. Wasn't quite healthy, had some real bad performances early in the season, wasn't shooting the ball the best. And then around kind of the midpoint of the season, all of a sudden everything started to kind of click into place for him. Was healthy, started to make a lot more shots, started to impact the game a lot more defensively, carries a very good steal rate. And there's just a lot of stuff that Maliq Brown Jr. is very, very, very good at. Now, unfortunately, again, we just didn't get to see that the entirety of the year. Missed the NCAA tournament, like I said, and as a result of that, there is some questions still on my end about his overall game and the ability to find the middle of the floor and score it routinely, and seeing him against different kind of coverages, whether it's drop or hedge or blitz. Like, we just don't have the overwhelming totality of reps and opportunity to evaluate. Like, the film is just, there's significantly less film for him compared to a guy like LeBaron Philon and a few others, which is what, for me, extends that range a little bit. Again, I try really hard to not have a super wide range for these players, but Maliq Brown Jr. was a guy that I'm like, I need one. I can see him being a starting caliber player. That's where his floor is. Like, I don't have him below that. So again, the outcomes are quite good, but there's also worlds where I think, like, if he reaches his very pinnacle, this could be an all-NBA player because he shoots it with range. He can handle it. Very high assist rate, which is very impressive for him too. He's a good passer, but he also comes with a higher turnover rate, about a 16% turnover rate this year. And if you compare that to some of the guard constituents in this class, it is a little bit high for my liking. So there's a lot to like. There's a lot of question marks I still have, but he comes in at a good spot on my board here at number 11 with the highest potential we've talked about so far. And just point blank, the guys above him aren't all going to have this high-end outcome in my viewpoint. Number 10, Bennett Sturts, a player who I think is a little bit of a false ceiling prospect. I have him at number 10 on my final 2026 NBA draft big board. Now, listen, anyone who prefers Maliq Brown Jr. over him long term, I can understand that for sure. But I think there's just a real sense of confidence I have in Bennett Sturts in the same way that I viewed AJ Mitchell going into the 2024 draft. Guys with dribble, pass, shoot skills who are very turnover averse, know how to initiate, run offense, and you can really play through them, but they're additive off the ball as well. Those guys are super easy to bet on. And Bennett Sturts, for me, is that player in this draft class. There's not players in this class who are smarter than him on the floor. I honestly think, like, it's him and Braden Smith at the very top of pick and roll point guard play, and Sturtz has better size. He has better defensive tape than Braden Smith, which is why his board placement's significantly higher than Braden Smith's. And then also, like, the three-point shot making is ballistic, crazy good. This guy is, you pull up his shot chart, he's green from everywhere. He is absurdly efficient in the half court. He's an elite rim finisher. And listen, I think understanding context is such an important thing for draft prospects. You can obviously watch the film. You can dig through every single play. And this is one of the issues I think that other people in the draft community run into. You go back, you dig into synergy, and you go watch every single pick and roll possession, and you miss the entire context of the game. If you don't watch the game and you only watch the cut up clips, you're missing stuff. It's just the reality, and that's one of the benefits going from April through June for me. It's time to go watch full games back. It's time to go see things that maybe I didn't have time during the year to watch while I was watching an NBA game or watching a different college basketball game. And I think for me with Bennett Sturtz, not only has he been an elite college player now for multiple years, he was unbelievably dominant at Drake, was huge for Drake making the NCAA tournament and winning a tournament game, but he was also unbelievable for Iowa. They made a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And again, all of that happens because of Bennett Sturtz. You know, you can give credit to Ben McCollum. He's a great coach for sure. He's part of why Bennett Sturtz has developed in the way that he has, starting as a Division II player without real legit Division I interests and offers. Like, you know, there's a reason he started his career in D2. But it's not because he wasn't talented and skilled. And I think his ability to kind of read the floor, make plays out of pick and roll, very intentional. And, oh, by the way, he's one of the best conditioned players in the draft, played about 39 minutes a game this past year for Iowa. Like, he's really, really good. And I just think, like, people are going to label him as a low ceiling, high floor player. I agree on the high floor. I have him as a starting caliber player. Now, he might not start immediately in his career. We've seen a lot of guys who are starting caliber players, especially in the backcourt, not start quickly into their NBA career. But Sturtz has all of the makings of a winner. I think he's going to be a tremendous player for a long time in the NBA. And again, I think the ceiling's higher than what people expect. I think there are some all-star outcomes for him potentially, or just some high-quality starter outcomes where you can trust him having the ball in his hands. He is an absolutely unbelievable shooter. My favorite landing spot for him would be Detroit at number 21. If he's still there, Detroit needs to pick him. It would be such a great selection for them. But really, any team before that, like Charlotte's a team that could really use another creator like him. I would love that at 18 for them. There's just a long list of teams that would be very, very good for Bennett Sturtz to go to. When you have a player who is a great fit around other talent, there's a typical reason for that. It's because they see the game so well and they know how to exercise your team toward winning, which is what I think Sturtz is best at, honestly. Number 9, I have Braden Burries, one of the biggest risers from my previous big board to now. My previous big board, I had him kind of in the middle teens area, and I moved him all the way up into the top 10 after diving back through the film, spending a little bit more time with the analytics as well. Like, it's really hard to deny Braden Burries as a good NBA player. I just think, like, this is where the league's at right now, is these guards who, and people are going to say, oh, he's not a point guard, he's not a lead guard, and they're going to use that to, I think, tear him down and say, oh, maybe the ceiling's not as high. Listen, every single team has one legit lead guard. Now, obviously, some teams can get away with two guys who are very good on the ball, and then they play off each other adequately. But for me, with Braden Burries, the fact that he's not trying to be a lead guard immediately, not trying to be a lead guard all of the time, is what makes him such an appealing player in the NBA, because he can fit around other talent. He's very good off the ball. He was a great cutter at Arizona. He was a very, very good spot-up shooter, really nice relocation skills. He's not the, like, quote-unquote movement shooter, a guy like Darren Peterson is, or Isaiah Evans. Like, he's a very different type of shooter, but he has those kind of base-level feel components that you want for in his starting wing or guard around other talent, and I think that's huge for him. He's got I think one of the most underrated elements, he's the best rebounding guard in the entire draft class. He does an unbelievable job skying in traffic. He wins you possessions, and I know that's not going to be something that a lot of other evaluators talk about. That's not going to be kind of the top of the line, bold, outlined aspect of his game that people want to fixate on and cover and share, but it's huge. It's important. Every single possession matters in the NBA. When games are decided by 2 or 3 points, 1 or 2 extra possessions might have been the changing factor in that. And I think Braden Burries is going to be someone who fights for those possessions. He's really good as a driver. I think keeps his head up adequately enough to be a quality passer and connector in the NBA. And, people are going to, again, dock him for not being a lead guard, but I think that's one of his best characteristics actually going into his NBA career. The fact that he can fit with other talent, you can build around him with other lead guards and other playmakers on your roster. I think Braden Burry's going to be a really good NBA player. He moved up a lot from my last big board to now, and I feel very, very confident in his ranking. Number 8, I have Kingston Flemings. And again, just for everyone to see, this is, again, the all-star tier right here, all-NBA up here, high-quality starter and starter tier. So very clearly, I think Kingston Flemings will be a starter in the NBA. Does come in at number 8 on my final big board. I do have some questions just overall about him. He is a little bit of a smaller prospect. The wingspan's not huge. I think that stuff all factors in a little bit. Like, he's going to get hunted a bit here and there. Everyone talks about how he's a really good defensive prospect. The tape wasn't always consistently true about that. I think he's a better defensive prospect than some of the other small guards in this draft for sure, but I think there are some limitations that we're still going to see. There's a lot of moments where he was late in rotations and help, and that's a real rarity even for Houston Cougars teams to show, is having a guard who's late in rotations and late in help and missing their assignment at times. Like, Kingston Flemings was a little liable to that. But again, he was a true freshman, so it's understandable. And there's a reason Kelvin Sampson stuck with him the whole time despite that. The offensive talent is unbelievable. The shot making, the pull-up dribble shooting, very good. He can get wherever he wants on the floor. I feel like he's very poised with the ball in his hands. He knows how to get to his spots. And I really think in the NBA, he's going to be a spot scorer. Now, when it comes to his overall offensive process, that's where there's a little bit of a question mark for me. Doesn't have the best free throw rate. In fact, his free throw rate's significantly lower than a majority of these other top guard prospects. He also doesn't have the highest three-point attempt rate. He's a very heavy mid-range scorer. His rim volume wasn't really that high either this past year for Houston. Now, I think, again, there's a lot of context in play with that. Houston doesn't have the best spacing component, and they're not really this pace and space team, so that's going to play into it. But Flemings was really good despite all of the offensive limitations for Houston. I just think his game in general is going to translate very well in the NBA. I think he's a better athlete than he gets credit for. Finishes above the rim pretty well when he's given kind of a straight line drive or finds a gap to hit the paint hard. Like, he can get up there and finish. And I think that's going to be an exciting thing to watch early in his career. Some of the high-end outcomes are going to be very good for him. Again, I don't have him as a possible All-NBA guy, but I would love to be wrong about that. And that's really one thing I want to say here, too, real quick. I hope I'm wrong on all of these players. I hope they all far out exceed what I'm expecting for them. I hope they all far out exceed what my kind of ranges are, because if that happens, it's better for the NBA, and I would love to be wrong about all of these guys if it means they turn out better than I expected. And that's something we should always do going into drafts, is root for players, even if they weren't the highest on our big board, if they weren't, number 5 or in the top 10 on our board, like, we should still be rooting for them. Fleming's at number 8. It almost feels a little low compared to where some other evaluators might have him. But again, I'm hoping he ends up being a top player in this draft, and I hope he has a great NBA career. And again, there's a lot of skill and talent to work with here. He had a great year at Houston. I expect him to continue having a very good NBA career moving forward. Then we get into Keaton Wagler at number 7 out of Illinois, and I do have his floor a little bit lower than Kingston Fleming's. I think there are some physical questions I have about his burst and just getting to the rim consistently, routinely. Again, Illinois played a lot of big size players. Like, that's going to limit your rim and volume a little bit, in my opinion. But he has some really great creation skills. He's got very good positional size at 6'5". I know there was a lot of question marks for people about his wingspan at a little bit over 6'6" wingspan. I mean, have you looked at his shoulders? He's just very slight. And that's really the biggest question mark for me going into his career, is what's that kind of functional play strength? Can he dip his shoulders, drop his chest low, and then get inside the arc super routinely? Because if not, that's where there are going to be some limitations for him. But I'm very excited about his NBA career. He's got one of the best handles in the draft. He's got very good understanding of how to kind of leverage his handle into creation. And for Illinois, they were a super slow-paced team. They were even slower with Wagler on the floor. A lot of tendency to walk the ball up, which I want to see change in his NBA career. I'd like to see him play into space and pace a little bit more. But in Illinois, like, he was the driver of the bus for them, and he led them to a lot of really good places. They had a great NCAA tournament run. They were good throughout the entirety of the Big Ten season for the most part. And Wagler was one of the main proponents for that, of course, and bailed them out of a lot of late possessions, but also was just very, very good for real stretches of play throughout the entirety of the regular season. And I think his ability to create off the bounce, his ability to kind of change pace and direction and and make it look like he's going to attack downhill just to get to his step back a bit. Like, there's just a lot of really nice stuff. I should have talked about Bennett Sturt's step back too. Really elite step back. Fleming's obviously got that dribble pull-up game. Maliq Brown Jr.'s got the elite deep range. Like, all of these guards have their differences. Wagler's very unique because he's got great positional size, but he doesn't finish above the rim. He's actually got a really great decel step. So, it's, there's just a lot of nuance between all of these guys, and it made it very difficult for me to kind of separate them out. The proximity between these guys is all, I think, relatively close. Obviously, I have some preferences here in the top 10 between all of them, but I just think, like, in general, it depends on what team they go to. It depends on how they're utilized and the talent around them. But all of them have legitimate chances to being all-star plus caliber players, which is very exciting for the future of the NBA. At number 6 on my final big board is Alabama guard LeBaron Philon. And Philon's game has really aged well, and it's grown on me a lot as well. If you go back to some of my 2025 NBA draft evaluation, I was actually a little bit more hesitant and a little bit more pessimistic about LeBaron Philon in the 2025 draft class. And the year-to-year growth that we saw from Philon has me extremely ecstatic and excited about his continued development and his ability to continue to take steps forward going into his NBA career. Obviously, going from his freshman season at Alabama to his sophomore campaign was a drastic shift, not only in opportunity and role for Nate Oates' offense there at Alabama, where he took over the reins of the offense and really had a huge statistical outpouring of production, but also the efficiency remained very high, very good true shooting percentage mark, very good rim efficiency. You think about Alabama, you obviously know that this is going to be a high pace, high space environment that is going to really, I think, direct their players toward a lot of rim and three-point attempts. And Philon is a guy who has really been the epitome of that. A lot of paint touches. Paint touches are kind of the king of basketball when it comes to advantage creation, playing on a drive and kick, forcing teams into rotations, and drawing in help defenders. And Philon, there's a really argument that he might be the best at that in this entire draft class. Abuka Corey obviously very skilled in that regard. Keaton Wagler has his own unique ways. Kingston Flemings can get to that. So can Sturts and Maliq Brown Jr. in different regards. But I feel like Philon, just the ability to win off the perimeter, specifically with his change of direction and change of burst. And I think what we saw not only was an uptick in role and opportunity at Alabama, but also a significant increase in skill and comfortability, improvement in his rhythm on the ball, where he took, I thought, massive strides forward as a jump shooter, understanding how much of a downhill threat he is, and then getting to his step back jump shot so reliably off of that. It's a very, very good counter move to have. His three-point attempt rate actually stayed about the same from his freshman to sophomore season, but he made a lot more of those three-point attempts in year 2 on a higher total volume of total three-point attempts. So Philon's game has really grown on me a lot. I feel like just at the kind of crux of basketball, at really what you're trying to accomplish offensively, LeBaron Philon's very good at that. And I think coming into this cycle, if you would have told me that I finished with Philon number 6 on my final big board, I would have been pretty surprised by that. Again, the grouping here between 6 and 11 is quite tight. I know there's a couple like visual gaps in here, but as you can tell, like the gaps are really not that sizable. And there's just different things for each of these guards as to why there is some gaps. Like I really like Wagler's positional size. I like Fleming's ability to nail pull-up jump shots super routinely and his athletic traits. I really love Braden Burry's combination of on-ball and off-ball talent, and specifically how he plays off of other guys. Sturts, I think, just as a supercomputer as a basketball player. Maliq Brown Jr., obviously love his range and the ability to get to the free throw line and improved rim finishing. And I think as he continues to grow and blossom offensively, he's going to get better at that. But Philon really is right now the kind of the king in this draft class about getting paint touches, getting into the rim, finishing at the rim. And I also think for Alabama, one thing that he didn't have at his disposal was a stretch big man. And I think when he gets into the NBA, if he does have a delay action 5 or a 5-man who occupies the corner, cough, Miami Heat, I feel like LeBaron's going to do a very nice job of getting his team constantly into that advantage. He doesn't need a ball screen to win off the perimeter, but when he has a ball screen, he's pretty good in that regard too. Keeps his handle alive, can turn the corner on guys, and again, has really the shot-making talent. I talked a little bit just a minute ago about Alabama really directing their players away from the mid-range game, but when Philon did shoot some middies this past year, he was actually relatively efficient on them too. So that'll be something too that as he adjusts to the NBA, maybe he can add into his game. Again, it's very difficult to guarantee that. It is a little bit of a projection because you have to build up that a tendency and you have to, on the floor, actually look for that shot and get to that spot to score it, something he doesn't do nearly as much as Flemings and a few of the other guys, but still something I think he's going to be capable of if he's ever directed in that kind of fashion from an NBA coaching staff. And if you do view him as a potential star bet, which pretty much all of these guys from 6 through 11 can be in some regard, maybe less so Bennett Certs for how people are going to view him, but like these are real star creator bets. These are guys who are going to put your team in advantage and win out of advantage a lot. And I think Philon's a guy who is going to probably most routinely out of everyone on this list get you into that advantage, and that's why he finishes at 6th on my board above his constituents behind him. Which now gets us into the top 5, and we move up to Darius Acuff Jr. And I actually have a green bar in my big board for Acuff Jr. here, and that green bar specifically is highlighting his offensive talent. Now, it does not go through the entirety of the board because I think his offensive talent is really what ties itself to his upside, and that's true for a lot of these players, but I felt like it was overly important for me to include in this video the emphasis on how dominant he was offensively. He was the SEC Player of the Year for a reason. He is one of the best guards that I've had the privilege of evaluating in the last 5 to 10 years of the NBA draft when it comes to actual body of work, actual production. At his age, the stuff that he was accomplishing, the things he was doing, leading an elite college offense and winning a lot, winning the SEC tournament, like Acuff was brilliant the entirety of the season. And especially once Malik Thomas was inserted into the starting lineup instead of DJ Wagner, that's when Arkansas really took off because they finally had a guy off of him that fit around him. And for teams drafting in the top 10, if you're looking for a franchise-defining player, you're looking for a player that's going to dictate your style of play, that's going to get other guys involved, that's going to set up your offense, give you really easy creation opportunity, it's Darius Acuff Jr. It just truly is. I've seen a lot of people downplay his offense, saying, oh, well, for every point he scores, he's going to bleed on the other end. I really don't think that's true, and don't get me wrong, he is a bad defender. He is. I'm just going to point blank say it. He is not good defensively at all. The effort's not there. The attention to detail's not there. The footwork's not there. I do think he has at least some functional strength, which should help him compete defensively. I think he's got some interesting ball skills, which should, again, help him compete defensively. But overall, the tape is very bad on defense. But the offense was still way more beneficial than the defense was harmful. And again, Jalen Brunson is not the rule for draft evaluation. I'm not saying that every small guard who has defensive concerns is going to win you a championship, but there's ways to counteract having a bad defensive guard. If teams are going to try and hunt Darius Acuff Jr., you don't have to concede switches, and that's something I wish GMs and executives and teams would just figure out. Like, yeah, this is what the other team wants to do. We don't have to let them do that. You can blitz the ball. You can have Acuff hedge and recover. Steph Curry won multiple championships doing that with Golden State. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that go into winning a championship than just being able to hedge and recover effectively. You have to have the offensive skill. You have to have the components around you. You have to have a lot of great talent. But if you're looking for someone who's going to direct your style of play, Darius Acuff Jr. is one of the pinnacles of that in this draft class. And no matter how hard I tried going back through the film, trying to be as pessimistic as possible, which I do for every single one of these guys, at some point in the process, I go through the film and look at it through the lens of just pure pessimism. Why won't this guy work? What's going to be wrong? I still couldn't shake him out of my top 5. I just could not do it because the offensive film is so polished. He is the best transition influence player in this entire draft. He's going to be great as an outlet and go type of guard. He's selfless, throws the ball up ahead, and it shows up in a lot of the advanced numbers. Arkansas's offensive pace was way faster with him on the floor than him off. It's not just, John Calipari's system. I've seen a lot of people chalk it up to that. The offense wasn't that fast last year without Darius Acuff Jr. It was still fast. It's still in the top 50% of college basketball, but it's significantly faster with Acuff on the floor. You want to know why Trevin Brazile had a career year? Look at Darius Acuff Jr. You want to know why Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle were really good as bigs for Arkansas? Look at Darius Acuff Jr. You want to know why Malik Thomas had such easy shot opportunities on the wing? Look at Darius Acuff Jr. What about Billy Richmond? He was attacking closeouts the entire time and the ball constantly hit him early in transition. Look at number 5 there for Arkansas. He was unbelievable this year, and I feel like, yes, the defense is a huge problem, and the impact, and you see it in the floor here too, like the floor for me is low, but the offensive talent is so high that I really don't see a world where he's not at the very least a starting caliber player. Maybe like people are going to say off the bench score like that archetype's kind of died in the NBA. But he's, again, I think part of what people have missed, and I've seen comparisons to Cam Thomas, like, that doesn't make any sense. Darius Acuff Jr. is an elite passer. He's very, very good at passing the basketball. And that alone is going to make him a starting caliber point guard in the NBA. The scoring is what gives him the upper echelon outcomes where maybe he reaches all-NBA upside. Now, I think for him to fully reach that, and you see that's like a top 10 percentile outcome for him is being an all-NBA player. The mid-range pull-up's got to be better. He shot about 35% on mid-range pull-up shots this past year. That number needs to be closer to 42, 43%, which is a pretty significant uptick. But again, he's young. We have a really good track record of success going back to college where he was playing off of super difficult shot diet. And then the three-point shot making was just ludicrous this past year at over 44% from three. Just an unbelievable season for Arkansas. He had such a great year. He's selfless, and yes, the defense is going to be a problem. Yes, it's going to at times challenge a team to win. But if you can build the right team around him, which should be, first of all, the question for a lot of these guys anyway, but for, I think, Acuff, he is such an offensive elevator. He's a team floor raiser to a huge degree, in my opinion. And I think for that reason exactly, it was hard for me to shake him out of my top five because the offense is, again, just so good. And I think a lot of people have undersold how good it truly actually is. Moving into number 4, I have Caleb Wilson. So he did not crack into the top 3. There was moments in time where I was like, man, this guy's really good. And I really want to emphasize like how big of a gap there is here. As much as I really like Darius Acuff Jr.'s game, I do think just from a team building standpoint, there's a lot more that you can accomplish by having a Caleb Wilson on your team compared to a Darius Acuff Jr. Part of that is, like we talked about way earlier in this big board, the barrier of entry for guards. There's more guards who can do some of the stuff that Acuff can do compared to forwards who can do the things that Caleb Wilson can do. Just positionally, there's a lot of value here, in my opinion. And I also just think like the athletic traits are so freaking good that it gives him a very high floor. You can see I'm projecting an all-star floor for Caleb Wilson, which is very high praise. And very rarely do I give all-star floor to players. I believe last year there was maybe 2 guys, maybe 3 who had all-star floor. And I mean, giving it to Caleb Wilson here because, again, I'm very optimistic about his translation to the NBA. I think there's a lot of really good skills to continue building off of. Of course, we're going to need to see him increase the three-point volume, be a little bit more of a self-creator, self-scorer off the perimeter, but he's already got a very good face-up game, comfortable with his back to the basket, likes that little turnaround fadeaway, which I think is an easy move for him to get to and go to. There's, I think, some semblance of a Pascal Siakam outcome for him as a possibility. Now, again, I don't really love one-to-one player comparisons, but I think it's at least kind of fruitful to consider, okay, what players is he somewhat similar to, has some similar physical advantages to. Siakam obviously not quite as vertically explosive, but very agile and fluid. And I think Caleb Wilson has a lot of those kind of characteristics too. He's one of the best transition play finishers in this entire draft. It's really either him or AJ DeBansa, in my opinion, when it comes to pure play finishing off of transition outlet breaks. And then I also think just the defensive abilities, while it's not, I think, polished or clear or clean cut yet, I think that it's a very, very promising work in progress. I still think the mental side has a long ways to go, but he's just so athletic that even when he does something wrong, he has the ability to make up for it in one way or another. Whether it's getting his hands in the passing lanes on a pass he thought he had no business getting to, or disrupting a play at the rim where he flies in out of nowhere as a shot blocker. Like, there's just a lot of moments this year for UNC where, like, even if he was out of the play or beat, like, he just recovers. He has all of those recovery tools that you just can't teach to certain players. And again, you guys know, if you watch my content, you know I'm not the biggest, athleticism means everything kind of evaluator. But for Caleb Wilson, it does mean a lot. It really does. And it would be, I think, disingenuous to say that he's not going to be an elite athlete in the NBA. I think it's disingenuous to say that that wouldn't matter for him because at the end of the day, it's a huge, huge benefit for him. It really lifts up his floor, which is why his floor is as high as it is for me. And then the ball skills are where he can maybe reach that Hall of Fame plus ceiling, where he can make multiple All-NBA teams and he can end up becoming a Hall of Famer potentially. He's so good. And again, I think he's just starting to scratch the surface on who he can really be. So if you're a believer in Caleb Wilson, you definitely should be. I also think there's like some similarities to Jalen Johnson and his functionality that I found early in his career in Atlanta next to Trae Young, and then as his career kind of panned out and developed, going from a point forward type to even more of a point forward, having the ball in his hands even more after the Trae Young trade. I think for Caleb Wilson here, that's kind of the vision where at the very least he can scale down and work really well off of other guys who can generate advantage for him. He did so with Henry Vasar a lot in inverted pick and roll action at UNC this past year. But then also the long-term hope is that he can become that advantage generator and creator for you. And you can play your offense through him while having some elite two-way potential for him to continue blossoming into. Then we have a little bit of a gap here at number 3 as we go into Darren Peterson, AJ Dybantsa, and Cameron Boozer. And here are my 3. I'm going to show them all at the same time. Again, this bar right here is all-time great. This is Hall of Famer, and this is All-NBA. So I am saying that there is an All-NBA floor for both Boozer and Dybantsa, and then just a very high All-Star, near All-NBA floor for Darren Peterson. So this is a real vote of confidence in all 3 of these guys. This is some of the highest floors I've had in the multiple years doing this style of big board. Very optimistic about all 3 of these guys. And if you want to know why I've been so excited about the top of this draft for the entire cycle, it's really how special all 3 of these guys are. With Darren Peterson, we'll start with him. The off-ball movement skills, the shooting skills are all through the roof. And I think one of the easiest things about Darren Peterson and really projecting him coming into his NBA career is how functional he is around other talent. And Kansas didn't have a lot of it out on the perimeter, playing Melvin Council Jr. and obviously that Bryson Tiller, Flory Badunga, let's just be El Marco Jackson. Let's be honest about it. Kansas didn't have a whole bunch of light the room on fire kind of shooters or ball handlers. They just really didn't. And as a result of that, Darren Peterson's offense really channeled into a lot of scoring and play finishing. But I think around other star talent, like if he lands in a situation like Utah, for example, with Keontae George, who's in the middle of emergence, that would be great for him. If he's around Trae Young in Washington, there's real functionality for him off of those guys while also still being able to provide that shot making. He can attack off closeouts, rip, go. And people are going to say, oh, well, that's not why you draft a guy top 2 or top 3. Well, it kind of is. The ability to be awesome off the ball while also being a great on-ball talent is very impressive. And I don't want to get it mixed up. I don't want people to misunderstand here. Kansas predominantly used Darren Peterson off the ball, mostly. It's not because he's just an off-ball player only. And I think Bill Self miscast this guy. I think 5 years from now we'll look back and say, why was Bill Self doing that? Part of that's because of his recruiting and the other talent he had. He didn't have a lot of other guys who were great play finishers off of Darren Peterson's gravity. So instead of Peterson just getting blitzed all the time and then forcing his team to finish through El Marco Jackson and Melvin Council Jr., they decided to try and play it the other way. And it makes sense in theory when you think about it, but it didn't maximize Darren Peterson at all, I guarantee you that. And going forward in a few years, we're going to say, wow, how did Kansas not do better with Darren Peterson? And why did Darren Peterson not have an unbelievable season at Kansas? Obviously, some of the health stuff played into that, the cramping and everything. But he's really, really good, guys. And I think at the end of the day, he might just be a top 5 or top 10 shot maker in the entire league. And the rest is history there. If you make tough shots for a living and you're so unbelievable at it that it doesn't matter what the contest looks like, it doesn't matter if there's a rear view contest, it doesn't matter if guy stays in front of you, if you can make the shots, that's really the end all be all. And that's one of the biggest distinctions. You can question the process, it doesn't get to the rim a ton, you can question all that, but if he puts the ball in the hoop, it's typically a good player, and that's what he does a lot of. Now he might be liable on some nights to, because of the lack of rim pressure, have nights where maybe he doesn't get it going, but he still got to the free throw line a lot. And again, I just think the shot making talent's so good that it's going to be very rare that he has just tour date kind of games throughout the stretch of his career. So very high floor, and again, I think a very high ceiling because of his shot making. AJ and Cam are both unbelievable, and as you guys can tell, as I've gone through this process, I was very much in the camp that Cam Boozer's the best player. I landed on him still with number 1, of course, but I do think this is a very strong trio at the top, and specifically a very, 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 very good top 2. And I wanted to point to the proximity here between these two guys. I have Cam Boozer and AJ Dybantsa very close to each other. I consider going 1A, 1B. I consider just going 1-2 like I did. And I really think if you have any of these top 4 as number 1, I think there's some sensibility to it. A little bit less so for Caleb Wilson, number 1. There's a lot more projection involved in that, which I could understand if you project that. But again, that's a little bit more difficult for me to just buy into blindly. But I think really this top three, like if you think Darren Peterson's going to be a top 5 shot maker in the league, like it's a reasonable thought process to put him number 1. If you think AJ DeVance is going to be virtually unguardable on all 3 levels, which there's a really good chance of, I don't mind you putting him number 1. And if you think Cameron Boozer is a better Karl Anthony Towns because he processes the game faster, doesn't pick up a silly offensive foul when he's already got 2 fouls on him in the second quarter, he defends without fouling to begin with, he shoots it really, really well, and oh, by the way, he's 250 pounds strong. You can't put a small guy on him because he's going to baby you in the low block. He's going to put you in the weight room, and if you put a big, slow-footed guy on him, he's quicker than you. He can handle, he can create out of pick and roll. Like he's a real mismatched cheat code, and there's a lot of really great stuff that Cam Boozer's going to be able to do in the NBA. AJ's got the best gathers in the draft. I love all 3 of these prospects, and especially these top 2 with Boozer and AJ. I've had so much fun evaluating them this year. I'm glad that both of them, for the most part, were healthy and available. AJ had a really, really great season at BYU, very efficient for the most part, carried a good true shooting percentage, and he gets to the line a ton. So that's going to be a really high floor elevator for him, which is why, again, his floor is in that All-NBA range, because I just think like there's a real chance that he has seasons where he shoots double-digit free throw attempts per game. And if you're shooting double-digit free throws, there's no way you're probably not making an All-NBA team. Like, let's just be honest about it. Like, that's a pathway to scoring 25-plus points a game. He's probably going to grab 7 rebounds a game, probably pour in 3-4 assists a game as well, just given how much gap help he draws. I thought that was one of the biggest growth points for him this year. Even from early in the season to the end of the year, he became a lot more selfless, willing to get off the basketball early. And he trusted his teammates. Now, BYU didn't have the best collection of talent in general, especially once Richie Saunders went down. But I think, for the most part, he did a great job this season as a lead initiator. Really fun player to watch. And he's got some of the best hip fluidity that I've ever evaluated. And I think that kind of special combination of balance, athleticism, of course, the vertical pop stands out. Very good side-to-side agility. Like, very, very good player. Very good player. And honestly, like anyone who has him number 1, you have no qualms from me because I totally understand it. Again, that's not the way I went, but I think there's a lot of smart people who can land on different kind of results here at the very top of their board without being necessarily wrong per se. And then Cam Boozer at number 1 for me, again, he's a supercomputer out there. You can't, if you blitz him, he's going to get off the ball. And he's going to make not only the right pass, but he's going to make a precise pass. He's going to hit the ball. He's going to throw the ball right where it's supposed to be so that the guy can shoot it and score it. And if you put talent around this player, he's going to be elite. He's going to be. Let's just think through Duke's team for a second here. He was playing next to his twin brother, Caden Boozer. He was playing next to Caleb Foster. He was playing next to Dame Sarr. He was playing next to Maliq Brown and Patrick Gungba. How much offensive talent is there? He had Isaiah Evans, too, who we're projecting to be a specialist role player in the NBA. And yet Duke had one of the better offenses in all of college basketball. Like, yeah, that's a really good college team for sure. But let's be honest about the offensive talent. The offensive talent was not that great at Duke, and yet the offense was great. And Cam Boozer is the reason for that. He was the driver, whether it's end of shot clock, they need to go get something on the board, and he gets on the offensive glass and cleans it up. That's part of it. If it's playing off the top of the key and running 4 or 5 pick and roll with Patrick Gungba, that's part of it. Oh, by the way, if you want to send a third guy in to try and tag the roller, good luck with that. He's going to spread out to the weak side corner. Can't do that. It's just every little thing. He can run ghost action. Like, having a 6'9" player who sees over the top of defenses, he's incredibly strong and athletic and smart and precise with everything that he does. He's going to be really good. And I think the only thing really missing from his game right now that I really firmly need to see is a mid-range turnaround fadeaway. If he gets that into his game, he's going to be virtually unguardable. He gets any semblance of mid-post scoring, up and under, turnaround, bump shoulder fade. I'm not even a bump shoulder fade kind of guy, but if he gets one of those, like, it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be really tough. He's a special player. There's a reason he's been the most productive player out of all 3 of these guys for pretty much the last 3 years. There's a reason he's won the most out of these 3 guys the last 3 years, and it's because he's been the best player between these 3 players. Now, if you, again, believe in AJ's upside a little bit, I totally understand that. But I think Boozer, and you get to the NBA, it's all about diagnosing team defenses, playing out of advantage, winning out of advantage, creating advantage, and Boozer just does that, I think, better than anyone in this draft class, which is why he is number 1 on my final big board. We'll take a little zoom out look here as well. I always love looking at it kind of through this lens a little bit because you get to see exactly where I'm at with all of these guys. It's very fun to look at it from this lens specifically, you get to see kind of how linear the board looks, obviously working kind of downward. It's just a lot of fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed the big board. Obviously, the video itself is the entire purpose of this and talking through my actual final rankings. But I just have to say the 2026 draft has been so much fun. It's treated me very well. I'm so appreciative of each and every one of you as well. This board will be posted on Twitter. Link will be in the description for that. Go follow me over on Twitter, and then that way you can load it in 4K. You can save it. You can look at it. You can examine it a little bit more. I might even make like a small tweak or two with a couple of the floors and ceilings in this video before I actually post on Twitter. But it's going to be the same order. Everything's going to be basically the same. I might just move up and down the floors just a tiny bit, depending on a couple of the guys that I want. But for the most part, the same thing on Twitter is going to be what you saw here in today's video. Really excited for it. So again, go show some love over there on Twitter. I want to see how many likes we can get on that Twitter post. But thanks again, everyone, so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed the big board. 2026 draft has been so much fun. We are less than a week away, so let's get to it here. Thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.